L'chaim, l'chaim. Good morning. Good Chodesh. It's 8:30 in the morning here in New Mexico. I want to thank you, Michal, for your MC and inspiration. Thank you all for putting together this amazing Farbrengen inspiration. I'd like to call upon Mr. Avi Webb from Crown Heights, a copy editor who hones messages for many meisters and for many organizations to help me get across the message. L'chaim, Reb Avi.
L'chaim, L'vracha, thank you very, very much. I think that my qualification is more that I do work with a lot of nonprofits, a lot of meisters. I am not by name a shliach and employed by the shlichus organization. A couple of years ago, the end of 2020, Hanukkah, I was thinking as a Lubavitcher, comes around Hanukkah, it's one of the easier holidays to pitch to those that you're involved with and connected with. But for someone who's not necessarily a natural extrovert, not somebody who's about to put on a big Hanukkah party and get together, which I know many business people actually do, and kol hakavod to all of them, the fact that so much of the world was on Zoom already was the extra push that I needed to say I can invite a few people in a defined amount of time, we'll call it 30 minutes, and we can get together to do a little Jewish together, and I'll do my part in that way. So I'm fairly active in LinkedIn as well as Slack, different conversations that I have with other copywriters. So there's like a LinkedIn meetup people do. So I announced I'm going to do a LinkedIn light up. If anybody wants to join, it'll be a half hour and a few ideas. I said you can bring your own menorah. If you don't have one, I can send one to you. Bring your favorite scotch or a spirit of any kind. And I don't know, I think I said if you had suggested if you have a Maccabee moment, if something that you thought was the right thing to do, but it was difficult, you want to share that, just give people a little sense of what they could expect and not expect, so it's not too intimidating, but also has a little Jewish element. A handful of people responded positively, and a handful of people showed up, and Baruch Hashem, a half hour, very lovely time. At least one person there whose mother was raised Catholic and found out later in life that she's Jewish, and this was his first time really she had a menorah. He told her about it. She cooked matzo ball soup for the occasion so that he could come onto the Zoom, all prepared. But it was really a very, very new, completely new thing. And as I logged off at the end of the half hour, it washed over me a feeling of I am a shliach. And of course, we tell each other this and we know it. And we say not only those who do this full time are shluchim, everyone needs to participate in some way in the shlichus and do what they can. But what clicked for me there, and I didn't necessarily have the words at the time, but have sort of formulated more so since, was unlocking a little bit of the riddle of Chaf Ches Nisan, where the Rebbe said, I have done everything I can, now do everything you can. What possibly could Hashem need from the Jewish people that the Rebbe couldn't provide for him? What possibly can I have that the Rebbe either couldn't think of or couldn't find somebody more qualified to do? And what it came to in that very, not in an intellectual way, but in an emotional way, at the end of that, I'm connected with a handful of people who, for whatever reason, are not connected with any other person who's connected with the Rebbe, at least that I know of. I'm connected with people in a certain profession or with certain experiences, negative or other, who are specifically not going to connect with a rabbi, who are specifically not going to respond if someone reaches out with an official Hanukkah event or something that is more formal religion in some way. I am a shliach because the Rebbe needs somebody to get these people on the phone, and I have their number, and they're picking up specifically because of me. It was obviously a very, very empowering recognition. It was, as I say, if you have the responsibility, you have the responsibility. It was a moment of realization that if I pass by another one of these times where somebody I'm connected with, and I can imagine that they're not talking to rabbis, they're not talking to frum people on a regular basis, or in my frum connections as well. For whatever reason, their yeshiva experience, they're not the kind of people that are going to race to a shir and race to something that is officially publicized as a massive thing. If I'm the person that has that conversation, that connection, I'm the shliach to that moment, to that person. It's a very, very powerful thing. I think that there are many people much more qualified, much more successful at life, much more successful at business, much more successful at shlichus, that can share and should share. And I encourage, one of the reasons that I agreed to do this, and I think it's an excellent idea, is I encourage anybody who's involved in some way that's a little bit different from what we're used to hearing, should share this. I think that part of the reason that we have trouble bringing ourselves out of ourselves to actually do these things is because we think we're the nachshin, we think we're the only one. There's tons of people, very, very successful, because I know some people on this that I'll be speaking before and after me who shared in their ways as well. So I'm hoping that just the fact I'm a random guy who has found some areas that it's worked in my own industry as a copywriter, in the creative industry, in advertising. Many people I'm connected with in creative directors or agencies or publications in some way, can be useful to your experience as well. About a dozen years ago, I spent Shabbos in Princeton University where my brother and sister were the shluchim, and there was a visiting professor. His name is Dr. David Novak. He is a theologian, he's an ethicist, a scholar of Jewish philosophy and law at the University of Toronto. And he shared, he's an ordained rabbi by the conservative movement. And during the 1980s, there was a fallout between some of the traditionalists in that movement and some in the progressive area that were moving the official bylaws and what this movement stood for. Some felt they were moving away from halacha, and those that were more traditional, there were certain specific decisions made there, felt that this was no longer what they stood for, and they wanted to not associate with the Orthodox movement per se, but have something more traditional. So he was involved in the strengthening of something called the UTJ, the Union for Traditional Judaism, and it was a variation of the same belief system with, at its bedrock, a commitment to halacha. And so certain things, certain lines, they chose that they're not going to cross, and this is what they stand for, and this is what they're going to do. At some point, they tried working together, then they sort of split more formally. This is the story he told. This is the story as I heard it from him. And this is as much as I can validate. He says that mid to late 1980s, when this formal split happened, he receives a call from the Rebbe's office. The Lubavitcher Rebbe wants to meet you. So the Lubavitcher wants to meet you. It's the greatest honor and the greatest horror. What did I do to be called to the Lubavitcher Rebbe's office? It's terrifying in a certain way, and obviously the greatest honor in the world. Him, and I believe a group of those that were involved at the same time. So they come to 770, and they're brought to meet the Rebbe. And he describes how for close to an hour, the Rebbe is asking them detailed questions about the nature of their split. Exactly who said what, and what said whom, and what was the compromise they tried to reach, and what, and why did it not work, back and forth. And at some point, he says, the Rebbe's face visibly relaxed, and it seemed to me he felt satisfied that the split was over principle, not over power, not over a personal issue. And when it seemed that the Rebbe was satisfied that this was about principle, the Rebbe looked at us and encouraged us in the Union for Traditional Judaism and said, you'll be able to reach people I could never reach. This is the story as I heard it. It's not about Lubavitchers. It's not about shluchim. It's not about people who put themselves into the Orthodox box. I know there are tons of people. I'm connected with many people through my business in Lakewood and Tom's River. Many people there who are taking these opportunities and seeing that they have a responsibility as well. Many of them first saw it through Lubavitchers. Some of them, for whatever reason, have the personality and are realizing the world needs this. The world is ready. every single person at every place that we have a connection, that someone is going to listen to us more than they're likely to listen to somebody else. That's our shlichus. That's the place that we can be, and that's the place we need to be. So I'd like to share a couple of minutes, if I can, of some experiences in some areas that I've seen this in my own business. Rabbi Levertov introduced me as a copywriter. I know copywriter is not the most intuitive career name. Many people think I'm a lawyer. I work sometimes with trademark lawyers, but I actually specialize in naming companies, naming products, slogans, and all the brand foundational messaging. So in this work, I'm connected a lot with other Jewish copywriters. I have many people that mentor me, people that I mentor, I critique my work and things like that. Other, like I said, agencies or companies, chief marketing officers in companies who work with, who I work with. So these are sort of my people that I tend to interact with professionally. And because I am at Heart of Marketer, I'm going to share my screen and give a little slideshow that I hope will convey some of the experiences, as well as some of the lessons I've learned along the way that have made it a little easier for me to engage in this way. So I'm going to share this, but I actually think that it's not working perfectly. So let's see if this works better. Let's see is my screen shared on the right way or not? It's not much, right? Huh? You see my screen ahead or the full screen?
I see the, I don't know, first part. I see then it's the next slide. It's coming up.
Okay, soll sein. Didn't work as planned, but that's part of the fun.
Okay.
So I had said earlier, and I think that this is really, from a branding perspective, this is what I know, but anyone can make what you make. No one can fake who you are. Any business, and this is a fascinating to me, but you see this. You could have a $2 t-shirt in the dollar store and a $200 t-shirt in the highest end boutique. It's the same product. There's no doubt it's the same product. The difference is, who do people want to associate with? What is the specific cut, maybe the style? What is the color? What does it fit with? People are very emotional beings. And so what do I have specific to me that people are attracted to, whether in my skill, my personality, or something like that? So the first area that I like to is to find your ich factor. What is it about me that works? Besides for being the most effective way, I think it's also something that narrows down the overwhelm of being responsible for the whole world. When you're somebody who says 2010, I'm throwing stuff at the wall and saying, what am I supposed to do next? Should I come up with an 11th missile that's smarter than anything else that ever came up with? Should I come up with 280 tanks? They're important, they're good, they're big, but what am I going to do already? So knowing who I am and knowing what I'm good at is a way to rein that in and say, no, this is something that I actually specifically should be involved in. So the first one is, who do I click with? Who are the kind of people that are around me? For me, I mentioned that it's creative people. A second area that I think is, where do I shine? There are some people who are very extroverted and are great at stopping people on the street and getting into conversations. Some people are much better at giving lectures, teaching shiurim. What am I good at? And how can I find ways to involve myself and influence through those things? And a third one is, what do I love doing? Because if you think it's the responsibility, but you're just drained and burned out from having to do it on a constant basis, it's very, very difficult to actually get yourself to do it. Someone that comes to mind, I think a lot of people have seen Rabbi Eli Stefanski, not a Lubavitcher. He is, I believe, a very successful developer out of Chicago. And he found at some point that he loves learning. It wasn't in the middle of yeshiva that he found it, or after he was married and everyone, I don't think he went to Kollel, but he found that for many, many years that he had a real chush and real joy in learning and teaching. And he started on this most recent Daf Yomi Machzer. He started a shir that I think probably many people in this room who do not consider themselves Daf Yomi people, maybe don't consider themselves shir Yomi people necessarily, but have connected with somebody who's a business person, who has a certain personality, and he brings his props to shiurim that wouldn't work in a yeshiva. You get kicked out on your ear if you tried doing that in yeshiva, but it works, and he has 300 people in person and thousands of people in online who are learning Blat Gemara every single day, because he found who he clicks with, other Baal Batin, where he shines in teaching, and he loves doing it. So I think that's something to find. What's there for you? A second area that I have found to be very effective is to make it your day job. And what I mean by that is that in addition to bringing tefillin to work and finding opportunities that send matzah to people who you're connected with, which are mitzvahim, that because you have a connection, you also want to give them a mitzvah. There are tons of opportunities within the process of our own work, at least I find in my own business, where you can elevate the conversation and the awareness in the business itself without doing something extra, without having to ask them, would you like to do something Jewish? One example for myself is Umalah Haaretz De'as Hashem, the very fact of people being conscious of God. Talk about him all the time, every time, whenever you can, in an appropriate way, obviously. But I have found myself that when I'm talking to firm people and I'm scheduling something, I'll talk to you at 3:30 tomorrow, Be'ez Hashem. If I'm talking to a secular person or a non-Jewish person, God willing, every single time. I want people to know that I operate my life in God's hands and by God's plan, and I'll do everything I can in my ability, but God willing. A second area is if I have options to use a story or a saying, a specific one, to illustrate what I'm talking about or give people a sense of what I do. If I can use something that's elevating in Yiddishkeit, that's an opportunity. I've been connected with an editor-in-chief of a certain business magazine. We have, some conversation going on. He answers my DMs periodically, and he posted something about the daylight savings, the vote that people wanted to make daylight savings permanent. So I sent him a link. He was talking about it, like basically what the impact is on people. I sent him a link to the Chabad.org discussion of how that impacts people talking about prayer as just interest in what you're researching. This may be interesting. Oh, wow, Avi, that's so fascinating. Without having a halachic conversation, we've had a halachic conversation and made somebody aware about daily prayer and all sorts of things. So there's interactions you could have. And the third area is to weave mayanas into the natural process. I mentioned about saying Be'ez Hashem in things, another area that I've seen myself with my email away message. I'm taking 8 days off for Passover. It says out of office. I think last week I said commemorating or contemplating freedom. And then one line in there, I'll be out for a week and I hope to answer at the end. P.S. If you're Jewish too, you may find interest in Passover.net. There's a lot of things, and I included as well a Maccabees video in case those that don't want to read all the articles at least can enjoy a recap of the Exodus played out in an entertaining way. So these are ways in our own process that we can find ways to do it. And the third area that really is the truth about all sales, but specific to I find it in Mitzvahim and being influential in some way, is if we could frame something not as a favor to me. I'm not asking you to do something Jewish, but I'm offering you the opportunity to improve your life in some way. So knowing how will this help my friend practically? One small area that this came up recently was with matzah. I had gone to the warehouse to pick up my brother's matzah shipment, and while there I see stacks and stacks of matzah from Ukraine. And so I thought to myself, you have people, this was several weeks back, they were more engaged in the topic, but people who are really hoping to do something active in solidarity and do something they can feel good about doing. So I posted on LinkedIn, the Jews of Ukraine baked you a matzah. And I wrote up there that I have X amount, several pounds of matzah that's baked by the Jews before, it got out before the real craziness of the war happened. And if you'd like to break bread and crack bread in solidarity with the Jews of Ukraine, ask me, I'll mail you a matzah. In the past, I've sent matzah, people were very grateful. Now I have people asking me, please send me one. Send me a pound, I'll share it with all the people at my Seder. It was a very beautiful opportunity to say, I'm giving them an opportunity to do something, not only asking them to do something Jewish. A second area are the hesitations that I can anticipate or remove, knowing that very often a person's no is not a no to what you're offering, it's a fear of what yes entails. If I send them matzah, am I gonna have to pay for it? Or if I show up at this year, am I gonna show up for the next 10 weeks at this year? So anticipating what somebody might be concerned about and removing that and saying, I'd like to send you a gift of matzah, or I'd like you to come for a one-night share in honor of whatever. You may choose to come next week too, but that's not what this is about. And the third area is including a social incentive in the offer of influencing in some way. And that is because people are very, very social beings. Very few people like to be a nachshein. And so if I accept this, am I going to be joining a cult? Am I like part of a certain type of person that does a certain type of thing? So if I can include and say, going back to the LinkedIn light up that I said earlier on, I said, several of us are getting together. The very first time I said, it's not this rabbi-looking guy who's saying, come to my Hanukkah thing, several Jewish copywriters are getting together. Thank God a few people did. And at that point, I was able to say, including person X and person Y, who I knew were connector type of people. So those were ways to make it very relevant and like, okay, a safe place for me to involve. So what I find is that when we think about what we're offering and what I'm really, really good at, these are opportunities that make it quite natural. It's not against our nature, it's within our nature, within the things that we're already doing. What am I very, very good at specifically, and how can I make sure that I am engaged in that way? I want to close very briefly. We're very familiar, I think, all of us, the professor who walks into a lecture hall with a large jar, a glass jar, and places it on the table. And he asks everyone, is the jar full? No, it's empty. Very good. He takes a few large rocks, puts them into the jar. Now is it full? Now it's full. So he pulls out a smaller bucket of pebbles, pours it into that jar, and they sprinkle through all the visible cracks in it. And they realize, obviously, as he pulls out the pebbles, yeah, of course, there's many cracks there, no problem. Is it full now? Now it's for sure full. And then he pulls out a 5-pound bag of sand and cuts it open and pours that in. And the sand seeps into every invisible crack, every area that's not seen, and really fills it up. Now is it full? Still not full. Takes a cup of water and fills up really in a way that there's no room for anything else. What possibly could the Eibishter want from us that the Rebbe himself couldn't provide? What could the Rebbe need from us that the Rebbe, for whatever reason, was not ready, wasn't able to say, I can do this for you? The Baal Shem Tov put the glass jar on the table for us and said, we need to fill this up. The Rebbeim filled it to capacity with foundation, with large rocks, with all the tools and the information and knowledge that we need. And the Rebbe, our Rebbe, over all these years, gave thousands and thousands of pebbles, all the shluchim throughout the world, and all of the nuggets of wisdom and opportunity and knowledge that we have, what to do with them. They're everywhere, and they're being dropped into all those holes. What is still waiting? Perhaps, and at least the way that I've seen this play out, is for every grain of sand, for every one of us to recognize the visible cracks are being found. Slowly, it's not obvious, but there are people out there in all sorts of places. They're knocking on doors and getting the visible cracks. What's left is for you and I who have invisible cracks, people who are hiding, people who don't want to be found, or people who want to be found, but not by a rabbi. And I think that when we do that, and when we really, really fill up that jar with every grain of sand to capacity, we'll see that last bit of water to overflow it, kamayim lo mechasim, and it will happen joyfully, it will happen quickly, and we should see it immediately. L'chaim.
L'chaim, thank you so much. One day you'll tell us what the astronaut is behind you, but thank you very much for your message and beautiful, beautiful PowerPoint. We're going to listen to a video from the Rebbe from Yudis Kislev Tafshin Mem Aleph about Golus and how it's time to conquer through Golus.
Das ist der Limud, Lechejela, man setzt da rein in die Füße, weil der sehr, man setzt da rein die Jiden in die Füße von Golus, kem duber leil Baruch. Ist auch das, wie Jesef huret mit Zreim, kipschute. Mentale Menschen nennt man a Nefesh, a Chelik, a Shenis B'Yisrael, a Chelik alakam imal Mamosh, me Yigra Roma, le Bira Mikto, in dvardose Bira Mikto, viele bis manche bis Amigdash Oyakaya. Steht auf der Ufechet, auf das me Yigra Roma von Kise HaKovid, und noch ein Neshome von Asata B'Teherohi, wo das noch von Arte Brosse von dem Mord von Kise HaKovid, und so kommt darauf in Bira Mikto, Nele Mazar Takt, und Shin Takt Lemate Imen. Wo das ist der Rest der Golus, wie sagt, in der Geres Akedra, noch kommt zu der Golus, in dem Golus Gufe, Zman HaGolus. Und in der Ruf Gufe, der Cheshach Koppel Chupol, von nicht wisse die Mashiach, mit alle Simonim, wer rechen Seis in Sien von Mashiach des Seid. ist das Jesef wurde mit zweimal Jerida Achig Dela Afshoris. Da sagt dann gleich Teres Semes, wo das Eche Teres Chaim Ero Bachayim, aber soll wissen sein, aber Jesef wurde mit zweimal in der Fall, was durch hat, der Jeride wird gleich Kopfschot. Bis wann ist das wird der Loschen und der Ingen, was mi Yom ad Yom, und mi Nora darf sie hören. Mit zwei Paare sich damals gewähren am Melech bei Kippur, aber das ist der Pastus der Kescher. Was hat der Schach ist mi Yom ad Yom, bis er da redet sich wegen mit zweimal Leid. Ist aber gewähren der Jed mi Yom ad Yom, und bis er mit Kevish gewähren Paare, mit zweimal hat mit Kevish gewähren, wie Jed mi Yom ad Yom.
We're honored to have Rabbi Yossi Groner, the head shliach of North and South Carolina, to bring with us on how to influence people, how each one of us could be an influencer. Rabbi Groner, unmute yourself, L'chaim. Malikim Zagun L'chaim. Please unmute Rabbi Groner.
L'chaim, l'chaim. Yeah, really, this mute is hashgacha pratis because mi anu kulanu to speak in the presence of greatness, the presence of the Rebbe, which the only expression is vayidoim, to be quiet and to listen and to do. But nevertheless, medafdoch reden. So the Mele will use a few minutes to speak a little bit about the inyan of Chof Ches Nisan and how it ties into Deir Shvi. Thank you, Rabbi Levittov, for the introduction. And the Rebbe should help, as the Rebbe would say many times, that the Dvarim sheyifalu bi ubahashemim. So I'm speaking to myself, and hopefully it will influence me and those that are around me. So Bechlal, as an introduction, the concept of us, people, little people, bringing Mashiach is a very big chiddush. It's something which doesn't make sense whatsoever. To think that all the datas that preceded us from the time of the Ovis and then Moshe Rabbeinu, and then everything that happened after that with the Nevi'im, and then eventually the Anshe Knesset Hagdela, the Tanoim, the Meroim, the Ge'enim, and so on and so forth, waited for our simple generation that we should be the ones to bring Mashiach. That's something which doesn't have a place in the Higoyin. It doesn't make sense whatsoever. And that's why Chassidim always knew that the only one that can bring Mashiach is the Rebbe. This is not something that simple Nivroim can actually do. The Rebbe was Machadish the whole Inyan that it's up to us that we have to bring Mashiach. And I want to just bring a few points to this to understand that this is not a gleich Vertel, but when the Rebbe said, or the famous Sikha that the Rebbe spoke, Purim Toshim Mem Zayin, I remember that I came in from Shlichus that time to be by the Farbrengen, and I brought Balabatim, and that Sikha was something that was very difficult to digest. It was very difficult to understand, and the Rebbe said a word there also. He asked the question, that l'cheda this is Inyan that the Rabbeim, the Nesiim have to bring Mashiach. The Rebbe was very, very serious, which was uncharacteristic in the middle of a Purim Farbrengen. The Rebbe said an expression that is mitzad yeridas adedes. And a lot of people took the Yeridas Haderis as if it's something negative that we did that caused us to plummet to the lowest level. There's no choice. And there was some Chassidim, I remember at that time, said that we have to reverse the Yeridas Haderis and let the Rebbe do it. But if you think deeper, and you look deeper, you see that this whole concept that the Rebbe wanted to be Meshatef, the Chassidim, and not only the Chassidim, but a whole generation of Deir Shvi into bringing Mashiach was not something that was just because of a fault. It was a reality. And maybe the Yeridas Haderis is mitzad Yeridas Tzedek Aliyah. But you see in the very first Maimer of the Kabbalah Sanasiyas of Yud Shvat Toshin Yud Aleph, when the Rebbe says that it was not in our Bechira that we're in Deir Shvi, but this is something that we are all in, the Lachein and the Far, Montmen, Tevim, that says it's demanded from each and every one, man, woman, and child, that this is our tafkid. So it's something which is a very big chiddush. It's something which doesn't make sense whatsoever. Why it's that this way? Could be it's mitzad teva tev lahetiv from the Rebbe, that the Rebbe wanted to be mishatev the whole day. I remember one time in Toshim Lamed Zayin, in the summertime before the Bachrim, we were Bachrim, then went on America Shlichas, and the Rebbe was telling us about our tafkid to be mevared in Itzutzis wherever we went, to lift the people b'mkeimam, and that will bring Mashiach. And the Rebbe then said that even if you meet a small child and you give them something to recite a bracha on a shahako, the Rebbe said water or whatever, candy, we'd interpret it to be candy, but nevertheless, when the child says the bracha bircha shahako, it's mevared and it's tzutzis that we're waiting, and that brings Mashiach. But the Rebbe spoke a Rashi Sicha about Heid HaHor. And he said that Rashi brings the example of Heid HaHor, that it's a small mountain on top of a big mountain. And there's the mushal, the famous mushal, that there was a giant walking together with a midget, with a short person, and they were walking along a wall, and they were very curious to know what's on the other side of the wall. And the giant, even though he was very tall, couldn't see. But he said to the short person, you climb on me, and then you will be able to see, and you'll report it to me. So the Rebbe says that in that sicha, that l'cheir it's a shaila, achsher dora bitmiya, as the Gemara says, is our generation taka, the generation that's proper to bring Mashiach. Is it us taka, that we can do it? But he said that it's kinana salgabe anok, like a short person on top of a giant. So he says all the aveda of the data sarishenim, the data sakatmenim that they do, they're taka giants. Elavaven, even with all of their work, they still cannot see what's on the other side of the wall. They can't bring it to the finish line, to bring it to the Zman of Mashiach Tzidkenu. Our generation is taka ananis. We have to recognize that we are small compared to them, but nevertheless, we have the ability that the Rebbe picks us up and puts us on the shoulders of the earlier generations, so we're able to reach there. So this is something that we have to understand, that whether it's mitav teva hatev lahetiv from the Rebbe, whether it was lachatchila, something that was preordained mitzat sheishes yimei bereishis, that's something that I'll leave to the maskilim and the grace Chassidim to try to interpret. It's not something which I think that any of us, most of us, have a idea, but this is the fact. So the fact of the matter is that when the Rebbe spoke the Sicha in Toshim Mem Zayin, it didn't saruder enough. Everybody thought the Rebbe was speaking in the Welt, and he was trying to change the atmosphere of the world. What shook everybody up is when the Rebbe spoke Chof Ches Nisan. But the truth of the matter is that Chof Ches Nisan wasn't really a chiddush over Toshim Mem Zayin. I remember that night I was on Shlichus, so I listened to it on a hookup, and it was replayed again and again, and there were conference calls, and people were speaking, and people didn't know how to react to it. So I spoke to my father 1 o'clock in the morning, and I asked him if, when the Rebbe went into the room, if he saw any shinui in the Anhagen. And he said that he was wondering himself, or b'meila, when the Rebbe came into the room after the Sikha, after Ma'ariv, So he brought out setlach that with inquiries from people that wanted answers, and the Rebbe began to answer it karagil. In other words, that when I say karagil is that this whole inyan of Chavches Nisan wasn't something new. To us, it was a revolution. But to the Rebbe, this was part of the plan and what he spoke about in Tashim Mem Zayin, and really what he indicated in the first Maimon. So the question now is, what do we do about it? And have we done enough? And how does it relate to us today? It's very interesting that when you look at the Rebbe's Hanhaga, B'negei to Deir HaShvi, we see that it's a Hanhaga that was different than any of the Rabbeim that preceded the Rebbe. The Deir HaShvi was totally different in so many different ways, and it's spoken about and written about. Rabbi Yehuda would write that the Deir HaShvi, just like Moshe was Mamshich, the Shechina Milmaila, the Matala Oretz, the Rebbe was able to take the deepest inyanim of Pnimi Satera and bring it down to the level that everybody should be able to understand. There's the inyan of the Deir HaShvi, of the Rebbe's involvement in every individual. We see that in the earlier years, there were yechidus. People had an ability to go into the Rebbe 3 times a week, Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. And then later it was cut to 2 days a week. But then, if you remember, in Tov Shem Lamed Hey, the Rebbe said then that he's stopping the Yechidusim for Yom Haledes. And one of the reasons was because the whole union of Yechidus is the meeting of the Yechidush Benefesh of the Chassid with the Yechidush Benefesh of the Rebbe. And people weren't living up to it. So the Rebbe said that he will do a bracha klolis by the Farbrengen Shabbos Bereishis. The Rebbe still accepted people for Yechidus, for people that traveled from out of town or special occasions like bar mitzvahs, chasanas, v'chulu. But the inyan of the chassid going in every year, Yom Haledes, that stopped. And there were still people that tried to go in for the Yom Haledes, and they would fool the one that was standing by the door, which was my father, to say that they had a special occasion. And then when they would go in, they would hand it settle for Yom Haledes. And the Rebbe spoke publicly about it. And the Rebbe said, "Me make menar tov der versteht beim Tir, menar sich up allein." For was not sich up allein? The Rebbe said because the bracha klolis that he gave that Shabbos Bereishis is the bracha through which all the hamshachas come. And if you're trying to circumvent that, you are not allowing the bracha that he gave on Shabbos Bereishis to actually be chal. It was very sharp for l'shenis. The Gabi, what am I saying this? Is that there were still many people that wrote to the Rebbe that they want to have a Yechidus, and they missed the fact that they can't go into Yechidus on Yom Haledes. And the Rebbe said, "Mistame yisnaik ka'anash la'achreina shenichnosim liyechidus be'eis ha'yisvadus." To translate that, Mistame, you will conduct yourself the way Anash are doing it lately, that they go into Yechidus be'eis the Farbrengen. So think about this for a moment. The whole idea of Yechidus is Panim el Panim. Yechidus is the one and only. It's exclusive. And that was the Maila of going into the Rebbe by yourself on Yechidus, even though it was filled with trepidation and awe and fear. And everyone that went into Yechidus alone knows the preparation that they had to do beforehand. And it was just incredible and indescribable. But nevertheless, here the Rebbe says that in the presence of Ribui, Yehudim, so many people together, you're still going into Yechidus. So what's the pshat? The pshat is that the Rebbe had the ability to connect with each and every individual as an individual in the presence of many. And you see B'chlal from the Sichos of the Rebbe, when the Rebbe spoke about what one can do, the Rebbe always spoke in the term of a Yachid, what the Yachid, and do. In other words, the Rebbe spoke to every individual. It's what the Alter Rebbe writes in the Akdama of Tanya, that the Maila of a Nasi, which says about Yeshua, that when he speaks, he can speak to every individual. And we know countless stories of people that came into the Farbrengen, and their questions were answered, and their brachas were fulfilled. This was something that is a uniqueness of the Deir HaShvi, where the Rebbe connected with every individual. But my point over here is that even though the Rebbe began to cut Yechidusim, but yet in Tashim Mem Vav, the Rebbe started something which was also unprecedented, and that was that every Sunday, the Rebbe would come out of his room and make everyone a shliach mitzvah, give them $1 or $2 with a bracha. And everyone can come and approach the Rebbe. The Rebbe was Yamot Ke'ilu B'Melech Basada with a smile, and he was listening to everybody. If you noticed, you would notice that there was a very big difference between the way the Rebbe gave out dollars on Sunday compared to when the Rebbe gave out dollars after a sikha or after a tefillah downstairs in the shul or a kuntris. It was always very, very quick. Mashenkin Sunday was the time for discussion. It was, as the Rebbe once explained, it was the Indian from Chesed. So the question is, why is it that the Rebbe took out so much precious time and stood every Sunday for hours upon hours upon hours, b'li hefsek, to greet people from all over the world? Muzman doch sagen that this was part of the Yin of the Yerashvi, that the Rebbe wanted to empower each and every one that you have the ability to do what you have to do to bring Mashiach. And what does that mean? The Rebbe would quote the Rambam very often about what the Rambam says, that that you should see that the world is shakal and only one, and the Rebbe would taich. And I know they're playing the tape. One machshava, one dibur, one maisa, and that could be machriya. And it's you, it's your action. Don't wait for someone else to do it. You can do it. So this is the inyan of what the data shvi is, and what the whole inyan of tut alzvas kent. He's not only talking globally, but he's talking individually, that we have to do it. And what does it mean that we have to do it? We can't do it just simply. It has to be biyigia va'avoida va'omo. The Rebbe would speak a lot of times about the inyan of omo. I know personally, several times when I wrote into the Rebbe sent me back betach that for Yukuyim Etzlei Haftachas Maimar Chazal v'Yagaito Matzasa. That the Rebbe said certainly will be niskayim by you the haftacha. The Rebbe didn't say the bracha, the haftacha of the Chazal v'Yagaito Matzasa. Nothing will come easy, even though the inyan of Mashiach is a mitzvah, and as the Rebbe explained many times, that it says behesach hadas doesn't mean that we don't have to work for it. Hesach hadas means that the mitzvah, that the gilui of Mashiach will be beyond and incomparable to the Aveda that we are doing. But it still can't come without Aveda. The Rebbe said many times, I remember Chav Dal Tevis Tasham Amid Beis, when there was an unscheduled Farbrengen, the Rebbe said that in Chassidus Chabad is nishtok b'derech memele. There's nothing that comes automatic. Nothing is instant. Everything comes through hard work. So this that the Rebbe spoke to us individually and said tut alts, and he spoke to everybody in the generation, means that we need to work on ourselves to change our mindset and frame of thinking to think in a Mashiach-dika way. We have to retrain our brains to think in a Mashiach-dika way. We have to retrain our hearts to feel in a Mashiach-dika way. And it doesn't come through slogans, and it doesn't come through cliches. And I know before the speaker mentioned about all the kinds of communication that we have today, but that's only what we call the head of the spear. There has to be something much deeper, as I will give a mashal soon. But I want to go back to this inyan of the Aveda. You see that the Rebbe himself, in his Aveda, did it with Haravanya, with Omel. The Rebbe says in many sikhs that even if someone has an ability and has the talent and has the gift of being to absorb Teda in a very quick way, it doesn't become part of them if it doesn't go through the inyan of Yegiya, if it doesn't go through labor. There has to be the inyan of Yegiya. Yegiya comes through Omel, it comes through a lot of hard work, of internalizing it, which means to say that for us as Chassidei Chabad, it means to toil and labor in the Rebbe's Teda. Not only to be Yetzer, that we're learning 3 prakim of Rambam, and we're learning Chitas, and we learn a Sicha and a Maimad of the Rebbe. There has to be the Haravanya, the effort that we put in to really internalize what the Rebbe is saying. I remember when we were Bachrim in the Lamids, the early Lamids, to a Chassidus Bachrim, that after the Farbrengen, they would go to Chazara with Rabbi Yael, they would make notes for themselves, but then they would say, what does the Rebbe want from me in this Sikha? How is my life changing because of the Sikha that the Rebbe spoke, or the Maimah that the Rebbe said? Allah has come v'kama in today's times when we need it most, and we're learning a Maimer and a Sikha, we have to internalize it. We have to harav in it. And this is not only to Chasidei Chabad, this is to everybody. And Baruch Hashem, we have the ability today to be meifitz the Rebbe's Torah in an unprecedented way in every language possible. And I say there's a moment of pride that yesterday I had someone in my shul, two people actually that are not Chabad, but they were learning a Sikha from the Rebbe in English, a Diuk and Rashi. But they spent the whole afternoon studying it and learning it and haraving on it, and they were beaming at night, that they were able to understand the Sikha, they were able to understand the Diukim, the whole paradigm shift of how the Rebbe looks at Rashi. This is something that we have an obligation to do. This is part of the bringing of Mashiach, bringing the Torah of the Rebbe to the people and bringing people to the Torah of the Rebbe. So this is something of changing our own frame of mind. And this is Miftzah Torah that the Rebbe wanted. Miftzah Torah is Pasha that we have to go out and teach. Then there's all the other Miftzahim. But it comes through Haravanya in the Miftzahim. Miftzah Tefillin is not just a fluke. Even the Rebbe says, Chatei ve'achil, but it has to be built on a very strong yesod. We have to internalize this whole inyan of the Dei Rashvi, how every moment of the day is a day that's given to the Rebbe. Every morning when we wake up and we say Moida Ani, right after that we have to think, what does the Rebbe want from us today? How am I fulfilling my obligation to the Rebbe? That the Rebbe harabet for me and the Rebbe harabet for Klal Yisrael. And the Rebbe is lifting me on the shoulders of the giant, as we mentioned before. How am I living up? If you could just sit and imagine, I remember in 770, one of the things that people would make them very agitated was if the Rebbe was waiting for something, the Rebbe would turn around and wait. The Rebbe vart, everything would stop and you would try to expedite it as soon as possible. If you think for a moment that the Rebbe is standing over you, as it says, V'hine nitzav alav, and avart, he's waiting for you. So that has to cause that you should have that to be able to do the Aveda of the Dei Rashvi b'simcha. I want to finish with one thing because we get carried away today, living in our generation where everything is basically either a tweet or a little slogan on Facebook and all the other forms and means of communication. It's all nice and good, but it doesn't fulfill the kavanah. So I want to share a story from Rab Mendel Futafas. And this is a story that we internalized when he would Farbrengen with us. And the story is that when he was unfortunately in prison in the labor camps in Russia, so he gravitated, or they gravitated to him, all the intelligentsia. So he had architects and engineers and doctors, and they liked him because he was always happy. He was always besimcha. And they asked him, "Was bist du besimcha?" And he said, "Why are you b'tzar?" And obviously, because their life came to a halt, he said, "My life is Avedas Hashem, and Avedas Hashem could be anybody." But the story that he told was that one time when they were sitting, so there was an engineer there who actually worked in the military. And he said one of the great inventions that they actually came up with was these kind of pontoon bridges that if you have to get troops and armor to move from one side to the other side over a river, so there's no time to build a bridge. So they have now this very strong material where they fill it with helium. And when it fills with helium, it becomes like a solid item, a solid bridge, and they can have troops crossing over it, and they can have even tanks crossing over it. It's inexpensive compared to building a steel bridge, and it goes up much faster. And in a time of war, it's one of the mechanisms that they have which allows them to progress very quickly. So Rab Mendel asked him a question. If it's so less expensive to produce this kind of bridge, and you can do it quickly, and it can help troops cross over, why are not all the bridges in our country built this way? So the engineer looked at him and he said, "What don't you understand? At the end of the day, it's made of material and it has helium. All you need is one ship to go through, and it nicks it and it opens it up, and the whole thing falls apart, the platzes, and there's nothing left." So Rab Mendel said that he internalized it in Aveda as well. He says sometimes a person comes and he becomes nisated, and but he doesn't do the work. So he's like a helium balloon, like a helium bridge. So it's good for the moment. But then if you nick it with a shtickle Yetzer Hara, nick it with a shtickle Taiva, then the whole thing falls apart. If you want to have a strong Yesod in Aveda, you have to work with yourself and transform yourself. And it takes all the planning and the building with the heavy steel. And then when you have something solid, even if it's hit by a ship, it's unmoved and it's there forever. And that's what Chassidus wants. The same thing is true when it comes to Mashiach. It's nice that we have the slogans. In our days, it was bumper stickers. Today, it's a tweet. But that's not the Aveda. That is the result of the Aveda. We have to be grounded. We have to build our own Yesod through learning the Rebbe's Teda and Kochosach and the Rebbe's Maimonim and Sichas and Igres, and Taka internalizing it and doing it, practicing it. And with that, we reframe our mind to be a Mashiach way. We reframe our heart to be Mashiach. And then we can fulfill the Kavanah and Taka bring the Nachas Ruach to the Rebbe. And the main thing is to Taka Sidi is Galus and Mashiach. Take of Miyat Mamish, L'chaim, L'chaim.
Rabbi Groner, thank you for your stories and for your inspiration and for getting us to be amal and to work hard on our learning and internalizing the message and bringing it to others. Listen to a clip from the Asicha from the Rebbe to the women from Chaf Beis Elu Tav Shinun about how we're empowered to transform.
Meisje vindt er der alte Rebbe noch klarer, das wird verlangt, aber soll machen, wie die Welt mit Atma, jeder Ayit arbeitet dafür. Es ist auch damit wie ein Feld, was ein Feld hat in sich die größten Möglichkeiten, aber die Möglichkeiten in einem Feld seien behalten. Und wir darf haben, soll kommen ein Mensch, und der Mensch soll dort reinlegen Kernblech von Tuh und Peris. Wird das Dämmel davon auswachsen. Weiß, Chito, Seire, Geffen, Seine, Riemen, in Weiß, Schemen und Dworsch, alle gute Peris, welche das schenkt ob der noch, der Lecher, der Eres, wie man noch tätsi Lecher, und welches hängt auf den Menschens Leben, als darf doch ankommen zu dem Mosen, was speist dem, gedei den Nishoma, soll sein a gesunde Nishoma in a gesunden Gut, und dann gesunde Sachen in a gesunden Neffen, wo das ist verbunden mit dem Emerson gesund, wo das ist verbunden mit Aufführung, die Anweisung von der Terror, und man darf sich nicht schrecken, was Lecheiri ist, dass eine große Arbeit, bei mir ist nicht keine leichte Arbeit. Ein Fieber machen von einem Feld, wie sie wird als Pitero angerufen, bestimmt Sode. Wie bald der Melch gefühlt sich im Feld. Ist doch verstandig, dass wir gleich auf die alle, was gefunden sich im Feld. Dies war nicht, weil Lachos kam, wie kam auf Menschen, was gefunden sich im Feld. Und das ist doch wie Chedisch Arachmim, wollten sich die Tage in sich als spezielle Schule und Kirches, was machen noch leichter für jeden der Arbeit. Wir können sein Schlichus, a Fieber machen von der Feld, soll das werden Adire. Und für wem Adire? Nicht nur Adire für Stammer-Menschen und nicht nur für Stammer-Jiden, nur für die Adire, für den Melech Malcham Lochim, HaKodesh Baruch Hu. Und macht noch leichter die Arbeit.
Spending Pesach here together. At our program, we wanted to do a learning component, and we chose to use the curriculums by Tut Alts. I think that both renditions, the adult and the children's, are terrific.
I think this book makes it relatable in a way that I haven't learned it before, so it's nice to have it laid out clearly.
I like having the book because it's fun to learn.
I like learning from it, and I like new clean books.
Kana Makim to thank the Mashiach office in 302, Tut Alts office, who giving us so much information, give us so many opportunities, give us curriculums, messages that we could first internalize ourselves and pass on to others. The theme of today's Farbrengen is how to Tut Alts was Irken to really influence others and bring the message to others, not only to ourselves. We're honored to have Rabbi Yossi Jacobson, who's going to share the dean of yeshiva.net, who's going to share a few words and bring with us about the message, how to bring the message to others. Rabbi Jacobson.
Beautiful. You could see me and hear me?
L'chaim, yes. A good Chodesh.
A good Chodesh, l'chaim v'levracha, a good morgen, a good nachmittag, a good avond, wherever you're listening from. Welcome, and thank you very much, Rabbi Levitov. Thank you very much, Rabbi Naparstik. Okay, I just want to make sure it's clear, yeah? You could see in here?
Zen and heaven.
Okay. The famous story, I read the story in Sipurei Chassidim by Hagon Reb Shlomo Yosef Zevin, Zechrona Levracha, the editor of Encyclopedia Talmudis, and many other Svarim. And he has a few volumes, I think 2 volumes of Sipurei Chassidim. And he tells a story there that Reb Mendel of Haradak, Reb Menachem Mendel of Haradak, or some known as Reb Mendel of Vitebsker, he came from Vitebsk. He was, of course, one of the oldest students of the Mezritcher Maggid. And after the passing of the Maggid in Tovkuf Lamed Gimel Yutas Kislev, 1772, it's known that the Alter Rebbe was Makabel Reb Mendele as his Rebbe. It's interesting that once on Simchas Torah, I remember before Hakafis at the Farbrengen, the Rebbe asked why Reb Mendele Haradoker doesn't go into the list of the Rabbeim, the Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid, and Reb Mendele Haradoker. The Rebbe gave a long answer then, but just the question itself was fascinating. He wrote a sefer called Pri Haaretz. Pri Haaretz, Chassidus. So Rav Zevin, Reb Shlomo Yosef Zevin tells a story that once he made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, I think Tovkuf Lamed Zayin, a few years after the Petir of the Maggid. And the Alter Rebbe wanted to go with him to Eretz Yisrael, but Reb Mendele felt that would be the wrong thing because the Alter Rebbe should remain in Belarus, what was called White Russia, the area of Russia, White Russia, Lithuania, Lyozhna, and then later Liadi, and become the leader of the Hasidic movement there. So the Alter Rebbe stayed behind. The stories are well known. So Reb Mendel of Vitebsk moved to Tveria, Tiberias, and that's where he's buried, in the old Beis HaChaim of Tveria. Maybe some of you were there. So Rav Zevin tells an interesting story that there was once a Jew. Apparently, he was an imbecile. He had challenges, and he went up to the Har HaZeisim with a shofar, and he started to blow shofar. And I guess he knew what he's doing. So the sound resonated. The sound carried far and far. And suddenly somebody in the Har HaZeisim is blowing shofar. So rumor had it, Eliyahu Hanavi is here. It's the Pchin of Tkaber Shofar Gadol. L'cheir is saying, V'haya b'yom hahu yitaka b'shofar gadol. Eliyahu Hanavi is announcing and heralding the coming of Mashiach. Hineni shalech lechem es Eliyahu Hanavi. So it's a big commotion. Eliyahu Hanavi, there's a shit in Gemara in Erevin and Gimel. Eliyahu Hanavi is going to come before Mashiach. So what's going to happen in the next day, the next few days? And Rav Zevin says the story circulated very fast. So before the WhatsApp era, but I guess stories could still circulate. And the news arrived in Tveria. And somebody went into the Heliker, Reb Mendel of Vitebsk, Reb Mendel of Haradak, Reb Nachum Mendel of Haradak, and he told him that Mashiach is here. And he told him the story. So Reb Mendel of Haradak went over to his window. He opened the window. He stretched out his head, and he gave a smell. He gave a sniff, and he said, Leide noch nicht. Unfortunately, not yet. So Chassidim asked the question, why did he have to open his window and smell outside the house? He could have smelled inside the house. The answer is, well, in the Shtub for the Mendel Haradak is Alam al Geven, the Ruach for Mashiach. In the house of a Mendel Haradak, there was always an ambiance of Geula, a consciousness of Geula. So smelling in his house wouldn't do the job. He had to see what's happening outside of his house. It's similar maybe to what is brought in the Sefer Pelech Harimin from Reb Hillel Paritcher, who says in the name of Reb Zalman Zezmer, who was his Rebbe, one of his teachers, who said in the name of the Alter Rebbe, that Lefnei Neshamas, the Rebbe used to quote this often, Lefnei Neshamas Hagvoyas K'may Reb Shimon ben Yochai Le'nechrav Habayis Klal. Certain Neshamas who didn't experience the Churban, not that they didn't experience the Churban, they knew about the Churban, they also fasted on Tisha B'Av. But it means their state of mind, their inner consciousness was in a state of Geula. It's one story. Now there's another story. This is an anecdotal story. You'll see why I'm sharing these stories. This is a funny story. It's a good Yiddish Amaisa, but it captures, like all these anecdotal stories and jokes, they capture sometimes profound truths. There was once a fox, and the fox was very hungry for lunch, and the fox didn't have a meal. And the fox saw on top of the tree, beautiful, beautiful big bird. The fox thought to itself, this bird can be a geschmacke lunch, but how do you get the bird down? The fox will start climbing the tree, the bird will fly away. Foxes can't fly. They're smart, but they can't fly. So the fox tells the bird, did you hear what's going on? It's the time of Mashiach. It's the time of Geula. Time of Geula, it says, we just read Achron Shal Pesach, V'gar Zeivim Keves. The wolf shall lie with the lamb. It's a time of peace. No animals are killing each other anymore. They're not destroying each other anymore. So why don't you come down from the tree and we could schmooze and we could farbrengen and we can hang out and we can have a wonderful time. And the poor bird was gullible. So the bird started to make its way down from the tree right into the mouth of the fox. At that moment, there was a hunter who came into the forest, to the wilderness, to the jungle to hunt. And as the system with the hunters is, they send out the dogs who right away sense what is going on, the animals that are available, and the dogs bark. So as the fox smells or sees or hears the the fox lifts up its feet, ready to run to escape the wrath and the arrows or the bullets of the hunter. So the bird turns to the fox and says, "Wo läufst du? Where are you running?" He says, the dogs are coming after me. The dogs are going to kill me. The hunter is going to shoot me. I have to get out of here. The bird says, "I don't understand. You told me that this is the era of Mashiach. All the animals are going to live in peace. Man and animal will live in peace. Mashiach is here." The fox looks up. I have to say this in Yiddish and then I'll translate. The fox says, yeah, but the problem is as the hint glauben nicht to Mashiach. The problem is that the dogs don't believe in Mashiach. Now, both of these stories, the first is obviously a different level of a story. The story and the Milsa de B'dichas, I should say, really, I think, convey a very powerful idea. There's two elements in Geula. There is what's called in Chassidus Geula Klalis and Geula Pratis in Tanya, Geras HaKodesh Siman Dalet. Or to put it differently, in another language, Lashon of Kabbalah, of Zoya and Chassidus, there's the Geula of Isarusa de La'ela and there's the Geula of Isarusa de L'Sata. Or to put it in very simple English, there's the Geula that Hashem brings. Only Hashem, nobody else. The creator of the world decides when Mashiach is going to come, how he's going to come, exactly what moment, in what fashion, what style. As the Rambam says in Hilchos Malachim Perek Yud Beis, there's certain things we're going to find out only when they happen. And nobody knows. Libe lepuma, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, libe lepuma loy galia. These are things that are not revealed to anybody. Ati Yedei Roza Yolam. Only you know the secrets of the world. Only the Rebbeinu Shalom himself, who runs the world and controls the world and orchestrates every event in the world, decides the moment of Geula, how it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, exactly what fashion it's going to happen, under which circumstances it's going to happen. And we is L'shuoscha kivinu, as we say in davening, L'shuoscha kivinu, kol hayoim, or those who say animamen or think animamen, achakaloi, b'chol yoim sheyavoi. And as the Rebbe used to teach, and he once quoted, interestingly, the Rebbe quoted the Brisker Rav, the Velvel Brisker, Tafshin Mem Gimel or Mem Beis, a Haggadah came out before Pesach called Haggadah Shel Pesach Mi Beis Levi. It was a Brisker Haggadah, the Torah of the Beis HaLevi, Rabbi Yosheber, Rabbi Yosef Dov, and his son Reb Chaim Brisker, and his son Reb Velvel, the Brisker Rav. So I think Reb Pinchas Menachem Alter, who later became the Ger Rebbe, the Menachem was on Yechidus, and the Rebbe quoted this word from the Brisker Rav in the Haggadah, that when you say Achakaloi B'chol Yom Sheyavah, it doesn't mean Achakaloi B'chol Yom Sheyavah. In other words, every day I await that he's going to come. Achakaloi B'chol Yom Sheyavah. The comma goes after Achakaloi. I await his coming every day. That's one element of Geula. But there's another element of Geula. And the other element of Geula is what I create, what you create. It's the Geula we create in our own hearts. Or to put it differently, to quote again the Sefer Moir Einayim, another Talmud of the Maggid, Reb Nachum of Chernobyl, Parshas Chukas, this was a Moir Einayim that the Rebbe used to quote very often, that every single Jew has a nitzutz of Mashiach inside of him or her. In other words, there's Mashiach inside of me. I am Mashiach. You're Mashiach. I'm not a Melech Mebeis David, and I'm not a fine. Many of us are not from Zed Beis David. We don't have the qualifications, but the spark, the Nekuda of Mashiach exists in every single Jew. What Chassidus calls the Yechidish Benefesh. That state of Geula in every person. What's Mashiach? Mashiach is the person who introduces into the world oneness. Achdus Hashem, Einoid Malvade. Every person has that Yechida L'Yachdik, that point in you. That's the Mashiach inside of you. And the Moir Einayim says that that's the Pshat. It says Dorach Koichav Miyakov. So Dorach Koichav Miyakov in Parshas Balak refers to Mashiach. Chazal also apply it to every single Jew, and the Rebbe says because both are the same. Because in every Jew there's a nitzutz of Mashiach based on the Moir Einayim. And when each person brings out that nitzutz, I bring out my spark, you bring out your spark, we all bring out our spark. It creates a fire. And that creates the Mashiach HaKlali, the collective energy that Mashiach brings into the world, that brings the Geula from above. And that moment, Hashem decides. But creating the ambiance, creating the atmosphere, living with it, introducing it into our own lives, as the Alter Rebbe says in Geras HaKodesh, that every day you can create a Geula Pratis in your own life. That's already something that's completely dependent on my own awareness, on your own awareness, on our own awareness and courage and confidence. I think many of you probably remember this, or it's good to remember this, and that is that in the famous Sikha, Chav Ches Nisan Tov Shin Nun Aleph, the Rebbe said that it was very shocking. He said that, after everything he tried to do, it was all in vain because the Geula did not come. And the Jewish people did not go out of Galus. The mission was not accomplished. But then the Rebbe added these words. He said, Va'od ve'ikr. There's something even more painful. As I'm not saying this verbatim, but the Teuchin, you could hear it today. You could watch it, you can hear it, you can read it. Va'od ve'ikr, as mis noch nicht reis von dem Galus Pnimi in Inyane Avodas Hashem v'chuli. Va'od ve'ikr. Wow, what's the ve'ikr? Va'od ve'ikr. In other words, there was even a deeper pain. There's a Galus Pnimi. There's a collective Galus that the whole world is in Galus. Klal Yisrael is in Galus. The Shechina is in Galus, and history is in Galus. And then there's a Galus Pnimi. There's that I'm in my own inner Galus. B'inyane Avodas Hashem v'chuli. And in a way, the Rebbe said that's the Iker pain. Why? I think we can understand. Because for so many years, we're trying to help ourselves and help the world and help each person go out of the Galus Pnimi. But if I'm stuck in that, and there, Hashem says, Hakol b'dei shamayim chutz b'yer shamayim. That needs to stimulate me and challenge me. And that's the story of I think it's connected to the story of Reb Mendel Haradaka, that in his house, there was already a consciousness of Geula. He had to smell what's happening outside of his house, because the Chiddush of Geula is ultimately the whole world. This brings me to another point. The Rebbe said this, I think, Acharon Shel Pesach Tovshin Chof Aleph, 1961, at the Farbrengen. How is it that suddenly one day the wolf is going to live with the lamb, the Gar Zevim Kevis? Whether you learn like the Rambam and Hilchos Malachim Perikid Beis that it's a mashal, it's a metaphor for the nations of the world, that there'll be full peace. Or Kipshuta, like many others say, that the wolf is going to live with the lamb. What happens suddenly? And the Rebbe said in a Vart that it starts off within a person. The world responds to people. Animals feel our energy, as we know. They sense it. Tzelem Elokim. The Zohar says, story with Daniel, it's brought in Tanya, Perich Chav Daled, I think. Animals sense the energy of people. Every person has a wolf and a lamb inside of them. There's a wolf inside of me, and there's a lamb inside of me. When a person can create the V'gar Ze'evim Kevis within the person themselves, automatically the whole world changes. So much of the Avodah of Geula begins inside my heart, inside my brain, inside my soul, inside my home, inside my marriage, inside my connections with people, inside my daily life, and inside my psyche. What does this mean practically? I have 10 minutes. Okay, so let me try to do this in 10 minutes. So I think it means so many things practically, but I just want to bring out one point that may be very valuable. In the last months of Tov Nun Beis, after Chav Ches Nisan, the Rebbe kept on sharing an expression that I had the schus to hear myself with my own ears, and many of you heard it, or you have the schus to read it today or hear it today in the Sichos, and that is Medaf Efen in the Eigen. It's time to open our eyes. Nestaima avodas habirurim, the avodah of birurim. Birurim means the selecting, the choosing, the sifting through between good and evil has reached a conclusion. And today the avodah is to open your eyes and welcome the energy, Kabbalah's Pnei Mashiach, welcome the energy, welcome the light of Geula, which is already present and manifested in the world. And as the Rebbe once expressed himself, I think it was Parshas Vayetze, Tov Nun Beis, that we're already Hakol Muchel, we're sitting at the table, there's the Levyosel, there's the Sher Habar, Hakol Muchel L'Sud, everything is prepared for the meal. Umedaf Efen and the Eig, you have to open your eyes. I think the Rebbe told Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, Zechreinu Levracha, the Sephardic chief rabbi of Israel, at a Yechidus Tavshin Beis, I think Vov Cheshvan Tavshin Beis, he said an expression that I have said, and I have said, he said that Mashiach is here. He's outside the door. We have to open the door. And I think he said, he spoke in Hebrew, which means pull him in. What does this mean? What does it mean to open my eyes? So I know this has been discussed so many times, and there's probably so many different ways of looking at it and so many different possibilities and dimensions to it. But I want to bring out just one little point that I think may also contribute to this vital conversation. What happens when my eyes are closed? If my eyes are closed, everything in the room is still the same. Nothing changes. When I open my eyes, I just get to perceive the reality. So it's not like when you close your eyes, the world changes. You know, kids, sometimes you close your eyes and you think nobody else sees you. Everybody sees me. I just don't see anybody else. So when we have closed eyes, we don't realize that somebody sees us because we don't see anybody. But everything is here. It's the ability to open your eyes, which is basically the ability to be perceptive, to open yourself up to seeing things that maybe moments ago when my eyes were closed, I could not see. So opening your eyes is not about changing reality. It's about seeing reality. Avodas haberurim is changing reality. What's birur? Like in Hilchas Boirer, in Hilchas Shabbos, in Shulchan Aruch Erechayim, was it Siman Shin Yotes? All the halachas of Boirer, the good and the bad are mixed. You know, the part of the salad that you want, the part of the salad that's rotten or moldy, it's mixed together. And you want to separate the desirable from the undesirable, the eichel from the psalus. On Shabbos, you're not allowed to do boirer. You're not allowed to be boirer psalus with eichel, because Shabbos, the focus is you see the good. During the weekdays, you have to be boirer. It's part of life. This is al pi nigla, al pi halacha, and it's al pi chassidus. Torah Parshas Lech Lecha, Torah Parshas B'Shalach, many Maimonim, Derech Mitzvah Sechel, Lo Yisavaru Eish. Shabbos, there's no boirer. Shabbos, you can eat the good. Derech Achilasa, you can take the good from the bad, but you're not busy with bad and good on Shabbos. Then there comes an era that Rebbe says, Nestaim Avodas Haberurim. Avodas Haberurim is changing reality, redefining reality. He says, today the Avodah is opening your eyes. It's being perceptive to reality. It's opening yourself up to reality. That's an intense idea. Think about it. That's an intense idea. Now, what would that mean practically in my life? And what does it even mean this time, Avodas Haberurim? There's no bad in me anymore. I don't have to struggle between good and bad. My good is not mixed with my bad. I mean, I can't talk about anybody else, but I can talk about myself. Really? Everything is borrowed, everything is clear. It's toiv and ra, completely two separate things. Wow. Which is why the Rebbe was surprised. Why is Mashiach not here? Why is it Al Pi Torah? He said, I remember the Rebbe said, Al Pi Torah, he doesn't know a reason why Mashiach is not here. This is what Hashem wants, but he doesn't understand. Al Pi Tam of Seichel, of Torah, he doesn't understand. Because, you know, Golus is like pregnancy and Gula is like birth, and it's like overdue. Kalu kol hakitzin, the Gemara says, in Sanhedrin Sadik Ches. But what does this look like? What does it mean to open my eyes? Perhaps one dimension is the way we look at ourselves, and therefore the way we look at our children, and therefore the way we look at our spouses. I should say first spouses, then children. Then the children. The way we look at our family, extended family, our community, our friends, our acquaintances, and the way we look at strangers and anybody in the world. I have to open my eyes. And when you open your eyes, you'll see something else. Now, opening my eyes is not so easy, because if for 45 years or 55 years, my eyes were closed, not so easy to open my eyes, right? Opening your eyes may be a very, very serious transformation, but it really means that sometimes my entire gullus is based on my perception of who I am and who my child is and who the other person is. And then I just validate that perception through what we call confirmation bias, through behaviors that intensify that perception of reality, which is all based on the fact that my eyes are closed. What if we can open our eyes and see really Nestaim Avodas Haberurim? Nestaim Avodas Haberurim is that what we're calling the negativity in ourselves or the negativity in our children may have to be defined in much more subtle terms. And maybe one way of looking at it is as follows. The word ra, we usually translate as bad or evil or negative. And that's of course true. But in Tanya and Perek Vav, the Alter Rebbe quotes the pasuk in Koheles, Hevel u'ru'us ruach, ru'us. The etymology of the word ra is ru'us, which means brokenness, a broken spirit. Those of you who learned Masechta Baba Kama, Perek HaKoines, you remember, on the first Amid, Koisel Ra'ua. What's Ra'ua? Not a bad wall. Walls are not bad. It's a rickety wall. It's a shaky wall. It's a flimsy wall. It's not a wall that is anchored, that is solid. It's going to break. It's not going to last. What's the shayrish? What does Chassidus teach? What's the shayrish? What's the root of all Ra? The root of Ra is not evil. Later it becomes evil. In the ultimate source, where does Ra begin? Ra begins in brokenness. In the notion that I'm separate. When something is broken, it's detached, it's fragmented, it's not part of the whole anymore. The truth is that every single one of us is part of a whole. Ein oid milvadai. Mala ha'aretz de'es Hashem kamayim le'yam mechasim is the organic state of reality where there's complete oneness. We are all part of formlessness. The beginning of Ra is when I decide that I'm a form, I'm a tziyur, I'm separate, I'm detached from the infinite, undefined wholeness of Ein Sof. And that sense of separateness, that sense of fragmentation, that sense of detachment, that is the shayrish of Ra. I think what we're seeing today more and more is when you look at people, especially you look at young people, we don't see bad anymore. I don't see bad people trying to become good people. I see broken people, Ra from brokenness, trying to become wholesome people. The Ra today is that you don't realize how beautiful you are. You don't realize how sacred you are. You don't realize how beautiful and sacred every child is. And it's difficult because we go back into that Gullah's program of duality, of separateness. I'm full of evil, I'm full of negativity. But it's time to open my eyes. The Rebbe loved saying over a word from the Moirei Nayim, Reb Nachum Chernobyl. In the last years, he said it over, I think almost every year, Parshas Kedoshim. It says in the beginning of Kedoshim, Kedoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani Hashem Elokeich. Says the Medrash Rabbah, Yochel Kamoini. You think you could be as holy as I am? You think so? Talmud Loimar, Kedushas ki kadosh ani, Kedushasi l'mayla m'kedushascha. I'm holy. You're not holy. You're holy, but my holiness is higher than your holiness. Stam, there was the famous Rosh Hashiva of Mir, Reb Chaim Shmulevich, Zavada Meid. So he once said, if you saw Reb Shloimke's villa, Reb Shloimke's villa was a Kaddish, a tzaddik in Yerushalayim. He says, if you saw Reb Shloimke's villa, you can understand why the Medrash thought, Yachal Kamayni. You think you could be as holy as Hashem. If you saw him, you would understand the question of the Medrash. But it's a strange Medrash. You think you'll be as holy as God? So God says, no, you can't be as holy as me. So the Moirei Nayim writes, Reb Nachum of Chernobyl, the Rebbe would say it over, the Tzemach Tzedek brings it. It's also brought in Degel Machem Ephraim, another grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. So he had a daughter, Adel, and Adel had a son. He wrote a sefer called Degel Machem Ephraim. So he writes the same word. Yachal Kamayni, the Rebbe used to say, Yachal Kamayni b'nichusa. It's not a question mark, it's an exclamation point. Yachal Kamayni, you could be like me. Yachal Kamayni. B'nichusa. Talmud Loimar ki kadosh ani kedushasi l'mayla mikdushascha. My holiness, Hashem says, comes from your kedusha, from your holiness, because we're completely one. My holiness, you create k'vayachal Hashem's kedusha. That's what a person is. So we used to say, this is the pnimius, this is what Chassidus says deep down. The Rebbe says, no, open your eyes. If I'm not seeing this in myself and in other people, my eyes are just completely blocked. It's a different vocabulary. It's a different attitude. The way you speak to a child, the way you speak to a bacher, the way you speak to a girl. It's not just the way you speak, it's the way you feel them, the way you experience them, so they can experience themselves. There's a beautiful word from the Heilige Yerushalayim. I'm going to finish with this because my time is up. The Heilige Yerushalayim says, Yochel Kamaini, Talmud Loimar, Ki Kaddish Ani. You would think you could be like me. So the Torah says, Ki Kaddish Ani. I'm holy. So he says, you have to read it differently. It's an unbelievable word. Yochel Kamaini. You think you could be like me? Tilmoid Loimar. Learn to say, Ki Kaddish Ani. Learn to say that I'm holy. Learn. Tilmoid Loimar, Ki Kaddish Ani. Learn to say it. I don't know if you know this, but I heard this from the Rebbe in Tovshin Nun Aleph at a Farbrengen in 1991, shortly after Chav Ches Nissen. I think it was Parshas Emor, the spring, summer Nun Aleph. I don't remember now the week. I should look it up. And the Rebbe said then something. I heard it at the time. It was astounding. I asked a few people. I was a bacher, so I didn't. I heard that it was shocking. I asked a few people. But what should I say? The question was better than the answer. The Rebbe said that v'amech kulam tzaddik, every Jew is a tzaddik, even the tzaddik that's discussed in Tanya. It says in the Tanya that not every person could be a tzaddik. So the Rebbe said that was before the Holocaust. And the words of the Rebbe is, das is given far the gzeides v'hashmadas von Dor HaAchim. The Rebbe used to call the Holocaust the gzeides v'hashmadas of the last generation. After what the Jewish people went through, everything is different. What does this mean? So this you could farbrengen on for a few days, and for a few weeks, and for a few months, and for a few years. Ad zebula baschaisa, you could farbrengen about this. But one nekuda, the whole way of looking at ourselves and looking at other people today must be through the lenses of Geula, through the lenses of Mashiach. Not to see Ra. The real Ra that exists in people is their feeling that they have Ra. That's the Ra. The feeling that they're broken, that they're separate, that they're disconnected, that they're detached. When the emes of emes is that every single Jew is a manifestation of Atzmus Ein Sof Baruch Hu in this world. And if I'm not seeing that in me, and I'm not seeing that in you, I get it. My eyes are closed. So with compassion, I have to be able to talk to my eyes and help myself open my eyes. Now, sometimes it's difficult because I'm programmed for so many years. And I come back to the Milsad of Dichasa. Yeah, Mashiach is da. But the hint glauben nicht the Mashiach. The dogs don't believe in Mashiach. Which dogs are these? Hani kalbin da chatzifen. There's voices inside of me that schlep me away from the truth of who I am, from the truth of who you are, from the truth of that consciousness of absolute oneness with Atzmus Ein Sof Baruch Hu. That is the true reality of every single Jew and ultimately of every person and ultimately of the whole world. To live in that consciousness is a choice that I make every single day and every single moment. Who am I? Who is the person I'm breathing into? Who is the person I'm experiencing? Who is the person that is communicating right now with myself, with my spouse, with my children, with anybody in the world? Who is that person? Is that a person who is a conduit for absolute infinity? Or is that a person who's wounded and bruised and evil and bad and detached and depressed and despondent and anxious with all of my challenges and wounds?
L'chaim, Rabbi Jacobson. We hold on. You're going to be introducing our guest, special speaker, in a moment. I just want to mention that today is the Yartzeit, Dr. Bendel's Yartzeit. It's a very appropriate story about him. We're going to hear a sikha, watch a sikha from the Rebbe, from Chaf of Tafshin Memhei, about influencing and preparing the world. And we'll come back to Rabbi Jacobson, who's going to introduce our speaker, and back on the theme of how to influence others, tut outs in the realms of helping others. L'chaim.
Jula Hamitis war Schleime von Niden, ist Hechet verbunden mit Lesaken, Elam bemalchus, Schindale Diud, hat die ganze Welt soll nicht standen werden in Amaimi du Matze, als wir sein, wo Häusele Hawaii am Lucho, ist davon verstandig, Am darf tun kol lechot, hatoli be, ab sei nikarev sein, dem Maime du Matze Voelom, zu sein, a Keli Muchshot, a verhäuser am soll sein, laov di kulam Schem Echot, verhäuser la Hawaii am Luchot. Wo ich mit du berechet ba Luchot, bei Over bekam Isvadrius. Als Allahs kamen wir kamen, und die, was haben a Kesher, mit Bnei Neich, wo sie seine Maschpia, und sie fielen nur mit Kamo Bnei Neich, sie beswieben, oder fielen nur mit der ganzen Schule, oder mit der ganzen Stadt, oder mit der ganzen Medina, State, wie Kajitze Bose, ist sehr Schlichus und sehr Achrayus, gedeelt Pi Kamo, und afal Piva, dass sie Lechele Achrayus Achi gedeelt, Peil sein, Nesa, was darf Peil sein, bei sich, soll sein, Ayid, Ascholim, Becholim, Yonah. Darf echt Peil sein, die Bnei Neich, Bisvive, und die ganze Stadt oder die ganze Melucha soll echt stehen, wie Schleimes auf Schorius, wie bald hat man heute Haftoche, als eine Mewake, Schelleli, Fikeche, wo das im Uwe nicht bepasst, als sicher wird sich der Eberste nicht auflegen als Schlichus und a Tafkid, auf ein Menschen oder auf ein Linien, Eber, da geht ihm nicht früher. Die Kirche soll das können durchführen und können durchführen bis Schleimus. Der
Chaim.
Okay. I guess we go now to segment 2.
We're working on having our special speaker. Make sure he's on yet.
Okay. So, Rabbi Levitov, do you want me to begin?
I'm trying to see if we have our speaker on yet.
12:18, he's coming on.
Oh, 12:18. Okay. Well, take it away. If you could also focus on this theme of how to influence others. How does each one of us able to influence others?
So I have now 10 minutes to introduce our next speaker. I'm going to divide the introduction into 2 parts, 5 minutes and 5 minutes. 5 minutes is going to be a general introduction, and the last 5 minutes is going to be a specific introduction. Okay? So, here we go. I want to, we talk about influencing others and being a shining example for others. I want to share with you a story that I heard recently from a friend of mine who's a shliach in the state of Washington, Reb Mordechai Farkash. Harav Reb Mordechai Farkash, Hagon Reb Mordechai Farkash, Mechabes Svarim. And I hear he shared this with me directly. He knows the person. There was a Jew living in Eretz Yisrael who was a businessman, and he got involved with the wrong people and with the wrong situations. And he was now in debt, a lot of money, and his life was in danger, and they were threatening him. And his life just became a mess. And it was so bad that at some point he decided that he's taking his life. On the way to work in Yerushalayim, he goes over a bridge. You can go off the bridge and fall down into an abyss and he'll be dead. He leaves to work and his wife sees he's leaving. She doesn't know it's the last day. And she says, do me a favor. Could you drop this off for our son? He was learning in the Chabina Yeshiva in Yerushalayim. She had a little package for him. Go drop it off for him. The problem, that wasn't on the way. He would already be dead by the time he gets to the Chabina Yeshiva. So he thought to himself, one last good thing for his son and for his wife, he'll kill himself on the way back from work. He'll go to the Chabini Yeshiva. On the way back, he'll kill himself. So he stops at the Chabini Yeshiva. I guess he knocks on the door of the yeshiva. The mashgiach comes out. He says, is there a boy here? Can you give this to him? He says, yeah, the boy is learning, but I'll give it to him later. He says, are you a taxi driver or you're a father? He says, I'm the father. So the mashgiach of the yeshiva tells him, he says, wow, What schus do you have to have such a son? He's such a diamond. He's such an exceptional boy, his mind, his heart. And he goes on and on to extol the virtues of this boy. He says, it's such a privilege to have your son in yeshiva. And that's it, he leaves. And he tells Rabbi Farkash, he says, I'm thinking to myself, am I so crazy? I'm going to make this child an orphan because of financial pressure. I have a beautiful wife, a beautiful family. I have such a child. I have such a schus to have such a child in the world, and I'm going to take my life. It's ridiculous. And he didn't do it. And he moved, and he got his life together, and he's here with us. I thought to myself, when you talk about the power of influencing people, we are often so stingy with words. But imagine what you can do for a father and a mother when you speak this way about their child. Imagine what you can do to a child when you speak to him or her this way about themselves. Imagine what you could do to anybody when you speak this way about them. Living and radiating a consciousness, an awareness of Geula, when everything is one, when the beauty and the goodness in everything and everybody is revealed, already means today how you speak to somebody about themselves, how you speak to a parent about their child, how you speak to a child about their child. And if I may add, on a more personal note, for many years, the Jewish world has experienced a lot of division. And everybody in Chabad often knows the stories about the opposition to Lubavitch and the opposition to the Rebbe and the opposition to Chassidus, and it goes back from the times of the Baal Shem Tov. And I want to say something. Many of us are still living in that age, and it's not helpful. It's not helpful. Open your eyes. There's a different world today. This is a world, a Klal Yisrael that wants oneness. I know there's still, not everything is perfect. We're still waiting for Mashiach. But generally speaking, if you change your attitude, you will see an unbelievable response. Some of us are still like living in an old war, the way we speak about people. I'm not going to repeat expressions that I sometimes hear from friends and colleagues. It's so unhelpful. You're like, what age are you living in? Do you realize the opportunities today? Sometimes you become your own worst enemy. It becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is the age of Geula. It's the age of Malach Haaretz Deis Hashem Kamayim Le'yam Echasa. But there's a condition. The condition is you have to respect people. You have to respect other people's rabbis. You have to respect other people's cultures. And you have to respect other people's communities. And you have to speak to them with respect. Every shliach in the world knows that when a secular person comes to the Chabad house, he or she has no problem quoting things from that culture in order to bring the person in. And yet, when it comes to from people, some of us are so allergic to quote anything from another culture because so secular sources you could quote to bring the secular people in. But chas v'shalom to quote from another community, from another circle, it's a betrayal of my identity. So besides the fact that it's shtusim v'havolim, read a little bit of the Mareh Mekaymis and Lakutei Sichos, but it's so ancient, it's such a primitive and parochial approach when there's an unbelievable opportunity today to really create a consciousness of revolution, of Achdus Hashem, which is all connected to Achdus Yisrael. And one of the people in recent years who has become such a powerful, positive influence on so many, and you would think that under the circumstances, he had every excuse in the world to be able just to resign and surrender to a very, very difficult challenge and very difficult fate, is our dear beloved friend, Rabbi Yitzi Horowitz. Rabbi Yitzi Horowitz, who many of you know personally, I had the privilege of growing up with him in yeshiva together and in, as we called it, the hood together, the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn, and watching each other grow up. Was always a person filled with light and love and kindness and generosity and caring, a very big heart. He and his wife, Dina, went out on shlichus in California, built a beautiful community. But then close to a decade ago, almost a decade ago, was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's, with ALS, as they call it today. And as the situation has deteriorated, the muscle stopped functioning besides Yitzi's eyes. But how much light did he bring to the world with those eyes? How much light does he bring to the world with those eyes? Talk about opening the eyes, Effen in the Eigen, just eyes. I just spent Pesach with Rabbi Yitzi Horowitz and his beautiful family, as I've spent Pesach with them for, I think it's 9 or 10 years now, almost a full decade. We have been spending Pesach together. I think almost every single year besides Corona, when everybody had to stay home. And Yitzi, in his very limited state, we go Pesach together, is a source of just inspiration to so many. Without moving, without talking, without communicating, besides his eyes, he really becomes a lifeline in the Pesach experience, infusing people with warmth and vulnerability and love and vitality. And I want to tell you something, by the way, based on what I'm saying. Every year, the KMR Pesach program of the Werner brothers do, the last day of Pesach, a fundraiser for Rabbi Yitzi. And this was spearheaded by a Jew who used to come there, not a Chabad Yid. His name was Reb Mendy Klein from Cleveland, a wealthy Jew, a heart of gold. And he spearheaded a tzedakah campaign the last day of Pesach. And it goes on Ad Hayom Hazeh. And you should just realize this, that the bulk of the money to support a person in this situation and his family, who obviously have no other source of revenue, comes every year from a group of mostly non-Chabad Chassidim, who just watched Yitzi Pesach year after year after year. So you would think he's a Lubavitcher Chassid, most of the revenue should come from Chabad Chassidim, and a lot does, but most of it comes from not. We're living today in a world where there's an opportunity for unbelievable unity, but the attitude sometimes has to change inside of my own brain, inside of my own heart. Yitzi is with us right here. It's a privilege to have you with us. It's a privilege to know you. And on behalf of everybody who's here, the hundreds of Jews, hundreds, I don't know how many people are watching, could be couples and families, so maybe thousands, but hundreds or thousands of Jews who are with us here all over the world. Yitzi, it's a privilege to know you. And all of us want to bless you at this special moment of the Rosh Chodesh of the month of Iyar, Ani Hashem Reifecha, as is brought in Kabbalah and in Svarim and in Chassidus, Ani Hashem Reifecha, that Hashem should give you and send you a refuah krova and a refuah shleima l'mayla mederech hateva la'arichis yamim v'shanim tovos. It's an inspiration to know you. It's an inspiration to know your wife. It's an inspiration to know all of your children, to be able to watch all of those children who, despite very difficult circumstances, grew up to be such fine people, fine human beings, refined, loving, cheerful, full of generosity and kindness, as I saw them this year again on Pesach, is really an incredible source of empowerment and inspiration. And may Hashem give you and them all the koyach and the strength that you need during this era, and all the darkness should be transformed into light. All the challenges should be transformed into incredible opportunities. B'toiv, hanidav, hanigla, varikoisi lachem bracha ad b'lidai. You should have all the bracha and Yeshua and atzlocha and refuah lamata me'asar tvachim b'poyel mamish b'toich klal Yisrael, for everybody what they need in their personal lives and in our collective lives. We should only have psuras toivas tamid kol hayamim b'toiv hanidav hanigla, until the great psura and the ultimate psura of the ultimate transformation, oidcha Hashem ki anaftabi, when we will all see L'Poyel Mamish, the Mola Aretz Deis Hashem, and the Dorach Koich of Miyakov, in the Rebbe's Lashon, the Gula Mitzvah V'Ashleimai de Mashiach Tzedkenu, take it from Miyad Mamish. It's my honor and privilege to introduce to you to this mega Hakel, this mega Farbrengen, our dear friend, Rav Chassid, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak ben Bracha, Rabbi Yitzi Horowitz. Take down the house as you always do in your own inimitable way. Thank you.
Someone can unmute him. He has a speech. L'chaim Yitzi.
If we can open our eyes like Yitzi's eyes are open, it would help all of us.
Like I said, the theme
I
is
see the
influencing
smile,
others.
Yitzi. I see the smile.
Someone could unmute him.
And you know, as Rabbi Naparstik wrote to me, he said, we talk about influencing people. Everybody can be a source of influence. Sometimes people think, I'm not a chief rabbi, I'm not a big askin, I don't have a lot of money, I'm not a leader, I don't run a community, I didn't build a school. I'm just a simple guy, right? That's a very natural thought. Here's a Yid whose capacity physically is so limited, and yet from his neshama and his eyes, and with the miracle of technology and the miracle of his wife and his family and everybody who assists, especially Tzvi Boyarsky and the whole team of Aleph and everybody in Los Angeles and the team of Shluchim who are behind him, Rabbi Beidelman and Rabbi Bestritsky and everybody else. And with the help of all of them, but Yitzi's neshama influences so many people and for so many years and in such a consistent fashion. Many of you read his Divrei Torah and his sermons and his speeches and shiurim that he gives out for Shabbos and for Yom Tov. And it just teaches you where influence comes from and what touches people. And how every single person, when I tune into my light and I tune into my own inner Mashiach, every one of you and every one of us is really an ambassador of love, light, hope, healing, wisdom, redemption, and infinity. So,
I'm going to ask
without
somebody
further
who's
ado,
with Rabbi Yitzi to unmute. And I know Rabbi. I was there. Please unmute.
there must be somebody standing there with Rabbi Yitzi. Does the person hear us? Oh, I have a friend. I met him on Pesach. He's Yitzi's assistant. He listens to a lot more shiurim than Asach Yidden.
He's unmuted.
Yitzi is going to speak through the computer, through his eyes.
Love yourself. In this week's Parshas, Kedoshim, there are many mitzvahs, but one stands out of the pack as a central pillar of Judaism. This is the mitzvah of Ahavas Yirol, love of your fellow Jew. In the Torah's words, and you should love your fellow as yourself. Rabbi Akiva says, this is a great principle in the Torah. How does one love every Jew, even those he never met? It's hard enough to like the ones you know. Why does the Torah have to add the words, as yourself? The commandment could have been, and you should love your fellow. What can we learn from the words, as yourself? From the words, as yourself, it is clear that to love your fellow, first you need to learn to love yourself. How does loving yourself help you love somebody else? In order to love yourself, you need to understand what you are. Being a Jew means that at your essence there is a neshama, which is truly a part of Hashem. When you think about this, you realize how amazing you are and that you are one with Hashem. You realize that you must be capable of doing great things. You start to love yourself. Now, if you realize that your neshama and your fellow's neshama are one, then loving him is loving yourself. The more in tune you are with your neshama, the more your love for other Jews grows. Regardless of their differences, you love them because you are tuned to their essence. This is why every Jew felt loved when he came to the Rebbe, because he was truly in tune with his neshama and therefore with yours as well. It was due to the lack of this love that the Bais Hamikdash was destroyed, and it will take this love to have it rebuilt. This is a key aspect to bring Mashiach. We desperately need Mashiach. We are all suffering in one way or another in this exile. It's time for it to end. It's time to get past our petty differences and show love to our fellow. It is unbelievable how small and petty differences drive us apart. You will also be surprised how a show of love will be reciprocated. It seems that the ones closest to us pose the greatest challenge of all. This one doesn't talk to her mother, that one doesn't talk to his brother, etc. When I was diagnosed with ALS, it was sobering. What is important became clear. It is clear that family is more important than the stupid arguments. It is clear that differences such as religious level, dress, etc. are petty. It is clear that we need to unite. It is clear that united we will bring Mashiach.
L'chaim, what a beautiful message, how to love ourselves, how to love our neshama, and then through that love each other and influence others. Rabbi Jacobson, you want to close out?
I want to.
You're muted again.
I just want to thank Rabbi Yitzi for your beautiful, beautiful words, and I just want to say that there's a sicha, you mechaven Simchas Torah, I think Tafresh Tzadik He or Tafresh Tzadik Vav. In the 1930s, the Frierdiker Rebbe tells a story that Reb Chanoich Hendel Kugel, the great chassid Reb Hendel, he became a chassid through meeting somebody who was an older chassid yet, I think from the Tzemach Tzedek or the Mittler Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, and he asked this person, how do you become a chassid? And he said, V'ahavta l'recha kamoicha. Chassidus is Avos Yisrael. It's really, really loving another Jew. And then he said as follows, Heben, Heitman on mitzich. You start off with yourself. The Yid innevenik. He says, B'daf libhaben the Yid in zich. So that was beautiful. Thank you so much. And the truth is, I think, what we find so often, and I think Rabbi Yitzi knows this very well, I think we know all this, sometimes Avos Yisrael can also become a distraction of truth, because if I really hate myself and I love other people, very often that love is going to be very, very tarnished, because we give other people our own energy. And if inside I'm not a wholesome person, if I'm not a worked out person, ultimately I'm going to use other people to be able to feel better instead of really, really helping them. So when we really go into our own internal space, and maybe that's the final frontier, really embrace yourself and all your pieces and work it through, then you could really, really be there for another person. Because if I'm not a worked out person, if my issues are completely ignored and not worked out, then your issues will trigger my issues and we will become entangled. But if I am at least aware of what's going on, then your issues can trigger my empathy and I could be there for you. So that's very powerful. Thank you, Rabbi Yitzi, and thank you, everybody.
We're now going to hear a promo about this event and Tut Altzma, how we could influence others, and then we'll hear a sicha from the Rebbe. Thank you.
Awesome mitzvah achas, do one mitzvah. Arei satzma, he tips the balance. V'echriyas kol oilam kavschos. Take out our phones and accept a pledge of mitzvahs. We could accumulate hundreds of millions of mitzvahs to change the world into a world of kulei zakai.
Hello, Chevro. This is such an amazing opportunity. Mate, we can reach so many Yidden around the world. Chevra, mate, this is such an opportunity. We can literally get millions of mitzvahs from around the whole Australia. Everyone joining in, just each of us, just bring just a couple people, and it could be huge. Every single Aussie bloke from Brisbane to Adelaide to Sydney. Mate, everyone could get on the train. We're gonna show the world what Melbourne can do, you know? We might be a small city down under, but we can really, really tip the scales. Before you know it, there's gonna be millions of mitzvahs coming out of Australia. Come on, guys, we got this.
Beschaß mich sich nicht magbil, beschaß mich fort in der Schliches wissen die dass der Rebbe der Schwer, dass mir Yasser gewähnt, bemeile ist Dvorov, Choyim ve Kayomim, bechol Shona ve Shona. Bemeile fort mir sich mit seinem Keach, mit Schluche Shalodom, ist das, was darf tun bei Dibur, müssen sich ankommen zu sein Sechel, bemeile wird es gehen durch seine Idee, und das, was darf tun bei der Chmakif allein, ist dort nicht eine Gehe seine Idee, aber das ist ein Cheche Tuftan. Und wir sollen mitnehmen die Atschloche von dem Tag und von der Iserere sollen sie sagen, Lachaim, Bemela, Broche, darf sich auf etwas Tau sein und Schere sein und danach sollen das herabnehmen von Makifim und hereinnehmen in Pnimim und bringen in die allererste, was sie besuchen, nicht nur dem Ner Mitzvah, Vetere, Erki, Pschute, nur die Pnimis Atere und Pnimis HaMitzvahs, weil das ist uns gegeben geworden durch Teres Achsidus, Hadroche Seho und Min Hogeho. Und mit das ist aber Kodesh Baruch und Mide Kneged Mide, nur weil dann kam Poem im Kocho, als das ist sie bringen, a Tesfes Broche, wa Atzloche in Seher lernen und in Seher Avedes hat viele und in Seher Kiem HaMitzvahs, als früher und sie sich mit Ageia sein und das, was Alpitere darf sein, am Melim Batere und am Mitzwe darf sein, nicht Chinom, nicht Magon, wie steht in Seher, nur mit der Farbatzon. Und danach sollen sie haben, Beteres Matona Milmailo, Schelei Bejerach, Higiosom, wo sie am Eis gehorvet und wo sie bekommt, und wo sie kommt, Alpidin. Lechaim, Lechaim. Ich habe nicht laufen die Bochrim besonders, aber die Bochrim, die in Gewalt, was wissen, als sie vorne sollen sie allein sagen, Lechaim, und sie bei manchen sagen, das Loche.
L'chaim, l'chaim. The theme of today's Farbrengen, as mentioned many times, is how to influence others. We have a webpage, as we saw the promo, onemitzvah.org. The goal is not that we ourselves should take on mitzvahs, which is a nice thing, but also to create a page. You want to try to, everybody should create a page and help others also in this endeavor. L'chaim, l'chaim. Chedesh, a good chedesh. I want to welcome our next speaker, next Farbrengen, Bello Wuzlein L'chaim, businessman. The point is that this is for everyone to influence others and how to bring the message to others as well. L'chaim. A good chedesh, Bello.
L'chaim. I'm not sure exactly how I fell in over here. I don't think I belong between the Rabbanim, Mashpi, my doctors, but Ashgacha Pratis, today is my father's 28 years old Koyach. So I said, I'm gesagt, tut alles was you can. So maybe each one has to do a little bit more. So first of all, I want to say a l'chaim, like we heard in the Sikha, the Zol Nimshav from the Makifim, in the Pnimim, and then the Bracha should have a chalois, like the Rebbe always said by Farbrengen v'yirotzein, sheyifalu bi u'ba'ashoimim, ba'chsidim b'Farbrengen always said that if you can be nifal bi, how could it be nifal ba'ashoimim? L'chaim. So first of all, I want to say I'm tremendous. Me and thousands of more Yidden are pushed and inspired by Reb Yitzi. We just heard him, Yitzi Horowitz, friend, a shliach, and it reminded me what he said yesterday in the davening by Nishmas Kol Chai. We say every Shabbos we say it. Al kein eivorim shepelakto banu v'ruach u'neshama shenafachto b'apeinu v'loshen hein the way we serve and we thank the Eibishter, we praise the Eibishter is eivorim shepelakto banu kol peh zelacha yeda v'choloshen l'chas yishava v'chol ayin l'chas yitzape. Yitzi is mekayim the tut alts was kennt in a way for kol atzmoisai toimarno kipshutoi, and he does it in a way that it's a dvorim hayotzim me'alev, as in ichnosim lelev u'poyalim pulasam. So I would like to talk about the two inyanim. Hopefully, I will have the time within the time frame. First of all, a little bit of the inyan tut alts basir kent. A little bit of a meaning, Lefiani is daiti, what it means, and then how we could translate it, to Kipshute in Maisa Bepeil, Yud Shvat, Tovshin Yud Aleph. The Rebbe said that there's two types of shluchim. He was talking shluchim of the Friedrich Rebbe, but of course shluchim of the Rebbe. There are those people that the Rebbe sent the shlichus begashmis. He gave them, if it's business, where to live and what to do. But the Rebbe says that it's the chadobo baru that in the shlich gashmis dike shlichus, the kavanah is a kavanah pnimis of a pnimis dike shlichus of afatzas amayonas of biru chelkei v'chulu. The Rebbe said, and then there's those shluchim that the Rebbe geschikt not only begashmis but also beruchnius. To be a melamed, to be a rov, to be a sheikhet, to be a mechanech, and so forth. And the Rebbe said that just like those shluchim begashmis, they have a kavanah pnimis that they have to reach. And the same thing, those shluchim that they send them for a specific purpose. In their purpose, there's also a deeper kavanah pnimis, and in that deeper kavanah pnimis, when you reach it, there's moicha, gap, moicha, deeper and deeper. There's always a kavanah pnimis, and the Indian is a fatzes, the nekuda of Mashiach, a fatzes amayonas chutza emusay kosomar. So I'd like to represent a little bit those shluchim begashmis that they didn't have the opportunity, they didn't have the schos or whatever. Ashgacha Pratis took them that they should be wherever they are, and they could do everything what they could do. So there's a sefer, a small Chassidische Kuntres, it's called Ramach Oisies. Chassidische Wörter. There's a lot of from Goinim over there. There's a lot of beautiful wörter. Though he says over there such a word. He says that there's three things that the results are the results are if you do it, the results are going to happen for sure. It's a double baru vadai that the results are going to come. What are the three things? The first thing is mashka. If you take mashka, then it's a double baru that at the end you must get shikah. You see this guy had one cup, a second cup, a third cup. You didn't take enough. Take a little bit more. You'll get shikah. The second thing he says is money. Money, he says, macht mishuga. Geld macht a mensch mishuga. You see people that have a lot of money, too much money. Ze wollen mishuga. They think the world belongs to them. They're entitled, whatever. So you see this and this gvir, he has so much money and mishmashuga devar, and Simon doesn't have enough. Give him a little bit more. The third thing, which is the nekuda, he brings down his chasidus. The chasidus poils a shinoi amuhus. It changes a person when you learn chasidus. You live with chasidus. You see this guy and this guy. You learn chasidus. It didn't change him. Simon, he didn't learn enough. To learn chasidus, he's going to learn more. You will see at the end. He will change it. The Rebbe told us, tut alles was can to bring Mashiach. So it's a double baru that if we do everything, Mashiach will come. And the fact is that Mashiach is not here. We did so many mifzoim and so many karkaftes, and we did every mifzah possible. There is a simon, amidafton, that we have to do a little bit more. We have to do not just the mayo, we have to do mayo ba'achas. We have to do it in a way like Rabbi Yitzchak Kolatz, Moisai Temarno, and then is a double baru that Mashiach will come. So I would like first to talk a little bit about the Tut Als, the Sikha of the Rebbe, and then a little bit about the Maisa B'Peil. So Tut Als, we all remember the Sikha. Those who were there. Those who weren't there, they heard the Sikha. There's no chassid today that didn't hear the Sikha. And everyone was shooken up. You were able to, in some empty, suddenly you hit the gas. Everyone was trying to, the people stopped breathing. They heard such words of the Rebbe, and Ada Yoim Azeh, mifabrengt, mishreibt, what did the Rebbe mean? Tut alles was erkennt, and the Rebbe said that such sharp of a shame is Pshat Chaz v'Shalom. The Rebbe gave up. He tried everything and he couldn't do it. Is it a new avodah? It's an alta avodah? And what could we do, little menschelach, that the Rebbe couldn't do? Anything we could do that the Rebbe couldn't do. So this is what puzzles Chassidim constantly. So I would like to go back to just Fiani is to bring a little bit clarity of in this Indian. I think that there's Medafin Spalten Kinho. It's not that complicated. I think the Rebbe meant Kepshutai what he said. The Poshet Pshat, the Rebbe always said by the Rashi is Amal the Poshet Pshat. You want to go into Rushim, you lose your Poshet. The Poshet Pshat, Yud Shvat, Tavshin Yud Aleph, the Sikha, the Farbrengen of Yud Shvat is so unbelievable that I don't think there was ever, maybe besides Moshe Rabbeinu, a leader in Klal Yisrael, that the day of his Kabbalah's Hanesias, he outlined the missions so clearly, so focused, and instructions how to do it. It shouldn't be B'chlal HaSofek HaShaila Bosad Gemeint. The clarity that the Rebbe delivered, his mission statement is unmatchable, unmatchable. And for 40 years, the Rebbe held our hand in order to Farbrengen das lepoil mamish. Also, the Rebbe gives up. We're not going to go in the ganze of my morid and the sikhs, but the nekuda is very simple. The purpose, the mission is to bring down the Shechina Dola Mata. What means that bring down the Shechina Dola Mata? Is of them also gekauft alle my morim and the sikhs and then the Farbrengens and Reb Yoel helped us to understand a little bit better that our Nefesh Abahami should be able to understand what means Dira Betachtenim, Iko Shechina, to bring down the Dira Betachtenim. That the whole Kavanah, the Tachlis HaKavanah of the Brias HaOlam and the Matan Torah is that the Tachten, the world itself, should recognize Yakiru v'Yedu Elikus. This is the purpose. Not that the world over here should be influenced from the Elikus that's in Rikia Ha'alev, Rikia Hazayin. No, the Kavanah is that the matter itself should become a Keli, should recognize Elikus. And this is what Dirbe Tachtoinin is, and this is when Mashiach will come. Today's Rosh Chodesh, man gesagt in Davden, you look in the Hallel, we say the end of a Hallel, we say, Yahalelucha kol masecha. So you see that there's a parenthesis that we don't say Yahalelucha al kol masecha. Asagrayim. What is the chiluk? The chiluk is before the avodah of Deir Shvi and the avodah of Deir Shvi. Till the Deir Shvi was the avodah of Yahalelucha al kol masecha. The Yidden, they praise the Eibishter, the Shvachim, and everything that you created in this world. But after you do a Dirbe Tachtoinin, Welt allein, Welt akelet elikus, the Welt recognizes the Eibishter, then is Yahalelucha kol masecha. Every creation screams out that ein ein milvade. This was the purpose. The Mele. So it's very simple that the Kavanah was that the Tachtain, the world itself, should make itself a Kelet Elikus. So what do you think, that the Rebbe couldn't bring Mashiach? The Alter Rebbe couldn't bring Mashiach. The Baal Shem Tov couldn't bring Mashiach. They all were able to bring Mashiach Keheref Ayin. But if they would bring Mashiach, then it wouldn't be Dirbe Tachtoinin. Then it would be that the Rebbe brought Mashiach, but the world itself did not transform itself as a Tachten. Therefore, the Rebbe, so if you may listen, the Rebbe and Yud Shvat, what did the Rebbe say? The Rebbe said, this is the mission. Who are the people that are going to execute the mission? Are going to be the Siddim, the Amshi Atzova, Tzivus Hashem, Liyav, and the Maimah, which is, the Rebbe gave us a responsibility. You can't sit back and enjoy everything. You are the lamplighters. You are the ones that have to execute the mission. So the Rebbe said, who is the one that's going to be the Memutza HaMachaber, that's going to show you how to do it? The Rebbe said that he will do it. And the Rebbe, for 40 years, there was no leader in the world that gave himself over to Kahal Adas Yisrael, not just Tachadach Siddim, with Maimorim, with Siches, with Farbrengens, with Yechides, with Lekach, with dollars, with answers, with the Mifsoim. There's no place in the world, the Olam Shona Nefesh, that the Rebbe did not reach. Every place in the world the Rebbe did it unbelievable. But that extra push, the Meyo Va'achas, this we have to do, because if the Rebbe brings Mashiach, the ganze Kavanah from Dirbe Tachtonim is not going to be fulfilled. So this is Lefianis Daiti. That's what the Rebbe came and said. The Rebbe said he fulfilled his mission, his contract that he signed with us. Yud Shvat Tavshin Yud Aleph. He fulfilled it 101%. The Rebbe Kol Yemei Chayecha, every second. But now we have to do it. It's up to us. We have no choice. And it's a Dover Vadai that we're going to do it, and we're going to be Matzliach. Just a story of the Matzliach, the Friedrich, the people that Farbrengen, Kol Yemei Chayecha, Lahov Yemei Mashiach. So there's the first shot. Kol Yemei Chayecha is Lahavi HaLeiles, and not only during the day, but also at night, you see a Mitzrayim, which the Pashtus, it means not only when the sun shines, when everything is good, this is when you say, thank you, Hashem, we're best friends. But even Baleiles, when it's dark and things are not so good and there's challenges, also then Lahavi HaLeiles, which means when the Rebbe says, Tut alz was you can't, even at night, it's not a day job. That's 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, it's over. And tomorrow, 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, you start again. 24/7 is Lahavi Yemei Mashiach. I remember hearing a story that one time Reb Shlomo Kunin called up his friend Reb Itzhak Groner in Australia. And we know Reb Shlomo, sein gesund und stark. he's not totally mugbal in the Hagbolas as a man. So he happened to call, maybe he didn't know. So he went punkt in midnight. It was 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and Rebitcha is sleeping, and he calls and he says, "Hello, who is this? The Shleimer." So, what's the matter? You know what time it is? 3 o'clock in the morning. It's 4 o'clock in midnight. It's schlaf. What? It's a brand of fire. So Shleimer tells them, it's a Rebbe did the Rebbe geschickt in Australia, du sollst schlafen. The Rebbe sent you to Australia, you should sleep. Was schlafst du? Was ist das a Nacht? La Hobby. The Mesa Mishiach is La Hobby Aleiles. Reb Zusha Partisan, I saw a vote. Reb Zusha had gesagt, that always he said, everyone remembers, and we are soldiers. He was standing by the Farbrengen. Never ever did he sit down. He was standing always like a faithful soldier. And his whole avodah b'chalig, when he says, "Ich bin a soldat." So he said like this. He said that a soldier, he has to stay guard. Did you ever see a soldier goes to sleep, prepares his bed, his pajamas? He's on guard, he's on duty. How could a soldier go to him and say, "Ich bin a soldat"? But the chassid geht nicht schlafen, sie nicht da Zach. No, boss. Now, from time to time, you could rest. You could rest an hour, sometimes you could rest 8 hours, you could rest. Aber mir geht nicht schlafen. Lahavi lemeisa Mashiach is lahavi halele. So that when it comes to a soldat, Keinmal schlaft nicht. Man kann sich abruhen. You can rest, but you can never sleep. So, speaking a little bit about praktische inyanim. So I would like to speak something. Everyone speaks. We come from Pesach. Arba banim dibra Torah. It's 4 banim, and the Rebbe says, with the 5th son, the son that doesn't even come to the Seder, erst afem. That fling the keiches, schlep him rein and bring him to the table, and all the shluchim and tut was we can, and Baruch Hashem that slaughter adira, unbelievable how the Rebbe has touched millions of Yidden through his chsidim to his shluchim to bring them to Yiddishkeit, to bring them to the table. But I would like as a balabos, I'd like to be practical. I would like to talk a little bit about the first son, not the 5th son. I would like to talk about the first son, the Chacham. Everyone thinks the Chacham is a Chacham. He doesn't need no attention. You have the Rosh, Tam, Sheni, the Elishal. So I would like to say, today in our generation, we have the Kinder. We have the young generation, which is like a Doy Chacham, but he has a challenge. He has a very big challenge. First of all, he feels outnumbered. He's one. Who the other one? The other one is a Rosha. The other one is a Talma, Sheni, the Elishel. The other guy doesn't. He's outnumbered. He feels I sit and I learn and I daven. What am I doing over here? So, this is what the Chacham feels, and sometimes he says, forget about it. Let me have a good time. So the Torah says, you have to know that not only the other 3 or 4 abonim, the Chacham is oicha ben, that the Torah, Dibra Torah, that he needs to be taken care of, because he also has challenges, and you have to help him. He should stay a Chacham. It's very important. And I think that this is an issue that I would like to talk a little bit, that I think that it's very important when you say tut als, this has to be als also. The Alter, the Baal Shem Tov gesagt, as a Havis Yisrael, the Yitzi spoke about Havis Yisrael, is Liba Mayid, the other end of the world, the other end of Australia. You never saw him and you never heard of him. You should love him the way you love it, the way you love yourself. The Rebbe gesagt, but you should also love a Yid that's right next door to you, and you see him every day, and he's your neighbor, and he's your friend. You also got to have a Havasol to him. So the Ben Chacham also needs a bit of attention. So it's no Moshe Rabbeinu. You know Moshe Rabbeinu, when he took out the Yidden from Mitzrayim, he said, "B'noreinu, b'skonenu, b'baneinu, b'neseinu." He said, "We're going all." The reason he was Moshe Rabbeinu because when there was a shepseler that ran away, couldn't eat this type of grass, he knew exactly how to take care of each individual. The Eibishter said, someone that knows to take care of every yochid, he's going to be the leader. And Moshe Rabbeinu, and therefore Moshe Rabbeinu was the leader to take care of every single yochid. So the B'noreinu, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't just say it because we all want to go out. It's because he cared and he loved every Yid. So we're talking about Baruch Hashem. There's today hundreds and hundreds of bachrim and meidlach they go to yeshivas, into school. All's good and fine, but there's a certain percentage that are challenged. They're having a little bit of a hard time, and we are here to help them. And I think that the type of people that could really have a tremendous influence on them are balabatim, achsidish balabatim. Because if you go to someone that, he finished yeshiva and a little bit wears off, and then you're going to tell him, he knows everything you're going to tell him he knows. He's not going to be influenced by his father, by his mother, by his Rosh Yeshiva, by his mashpia, by his friends. He looks in the big world and he says, I want to make money and I want to have fun. This is what they say. This is what they say. And we can't, it's not a stock market over here that you have 10 stocks, 8 are doing good and 9 and 2 are not, and you're averaging out, you're ahead of the game. Every Yid is on the neshama. You can't let anything go. You can't let anything go. And I think that this is where the place of Chassidus Balabatim come into action, the tut als baser can, that they could have the hashpah, because those people that are going, like Rabbi Jacobson said, they're not bad people. There is no bad people. They're challenged, and they think that maybe over there they will have more success. They're going to have more fun. And I think it's important to show them, no, that you could be a Chassidish younger man. You could have a beautiful family. You could be successful. You could be successful. You could do what the Rebbe wants. You could get up and learn Chassidus. You could learn Nigla, and you could have a good business, and you could have alles against the home. And believe it or not, it took me a few years, and I saw that the youth, the young generation, is looking up to that. They're really looking up to that. And I'm saying, there's a lot of Hasidic younger light today. The Rebbe said in Yud Shvat, some of them got a shlichus begashmis, some begashmis or berufnis, but when you begashmis, wherever you are, you should know you could influence unsere eigene Kinder, the Ben Chacham. You have the kayach. And I'll give you just an example. I'm not saying, I'm sure many people, I like to have by my Shabbos table, we have a lot of guests. We have bachrim, there's girls, and Baruch Hashem, I could say that there's a lot of comments coming Chassidish bachrim, and a Shabbos table where you're able to make them feel comfortable and Farbrengen with them, and not impose on them, just show them that you can stand a Chassidish tish, and you could have a happy table, and you could have this really it helps people and changes people, and I have seen it, and I have seen that. So I'm not gonna be much, but I'm gonna just bring 2-3 stories.
The Israelis are waiting. At the Shalak are waiting. It's going over to the Israelis. I would maybe invite you to come speak for the Israelis. But the Ik is in Shama's Maliyah, Tat is in Shama. Und Ik is ein Yid Lamata Masar Tvachim. So Zenzach Beguf Gashmi L'chaim. Thank you very much. Your message, and let's continue influencing people. We have a Sikha from the Rebbe again, the Chavches Sivan, with the Hebrew subtitles. And we'll move over to the Lashon HaKodesh.
Was benebel wird der Knie achig dele. Wie kommt es, als klein sich zusammen, 10 Nieden zusammen und es gucken, wie kap der alle Unionen wird noch nicht herausgebracht, marschieren. Hat dover ha pri in de moven klar und dann noch ich komme zu gehen und luft nach wurde sie dort noch a scheibe mit noch a in Farbrengen melden das noch einmal was schreiben dann noch in sein Massmedien gegen das halten und gedenken was sie verschrieben geworden und dabei bleibt das und Rahman Islam ist der Recht also ein Banal soll noch nicht kommen Moschiach was sagt, also morgen soll noch nicht kommen Mashiach und übermorgen sollten nicht kommen Mashiach. Und es hat Freitag und der Eisam soll schreien auf Mose. Und Hulu, immer wohl geschrien mit Hanemes, wohl gemeint mit Hanemes, ist eine sichere Sache, als Mashiach wird schon lange gekommen, zusammen mit der Gula, mit es war schlimm. Was ich kann noch tun, das weiß ich nicht. Warum alles, was ist getan, bis ist der Hevel, weil sie gar nicht der Reise von mir geblieben in Golus. Und was noch mehr, wenn ist geblieben mit der Gol in den Golus, bin ich mir echt, wenn geht zu Avedes Hashem. Und kommt über Kama Pomin. Mir hat eins gesagt, was ich kann noch tun, gibt das über jeder von euch und tut alles, was ihr kennt und seht, Roblingen, Maschinen, denke von mir ad Mamos in der Leben der Unionentlacke von Eris, der Teo, aber den Kehlen der Tichun und wie hier rotzen nach Sobkov sollen sich gefühlen 10 Nieden, was werden sich einnackschen und sagen, dass sie muss nicht werden. Bei den Nebensten ist damals das Amt Scheyerefu, wie so lacht zu laven, Nenul, Chatesenu und Chaltonu, ist eine sichere Sache, der Nebensten wird heraufbringen, der Gula Amitis war schlimm und Teke von Miyad Mamos und auf dem Meise, was sich kann noch tun in dem, auf zu geben machen, jeden von nachher verschlich auf Zdoke und wie hier rotzen, aber ich habe dann alles, was ich kenne und ich kann nur haben, tut alles, was sie kennt, wie hier rotzen, also unser Gefühl zwischen nachher Kolponen 1, 2, 3, was soll nicht zu geben, was man soll tun und was man soll tun. Weit wir hoike, wenn man soll echt spielen und soll sein, denke von mir, Mama, schon mit der Simcha, mit Tuvli, wo.
As mentioned throughout this Farbrengen, Maisa Appeal is what we're looking for. We're trying to have everybody influence others. Tut alles, was you can. Please create your page at onemitzvah.org. It's not only about us doing mitzvahs, but also about, most importantly, influencing others. K'et navor Eretz HaKodesh, navir et ha'hitvadut le'yididi, halav zalmon gerelik, she'nahelata. This is how we do the promo. One mitzvah.